Can you sit down? Yeah. Hello, we would like to start. Wat? Ja, ik zeg niks, ja. Oh, it's going well, Hans. They all now have silence. So I would like to introduce the EFRAG Administrative Board President, Hans Buysse, who will lead this conference. Hans.
Thank you. I started only this morning realizing that I need to introduce 15 people, so it's going to be a hectic program. Ladies and gentlemen, rule number 1, please shut down your phones or put it on silence. Thank you.
Not shut down, but you can Slido.
That's true. I do apologize. You cannot shut down your phone because you will need it for Slido. I will introduce that in a second, but please put the noise down. So, welcome. We are having a tough program today, and as you know, the last session was on the 7th of December last year, and I remember that was not long after the 22nd of November 2022, which is for EFRAG and the ESRS is really one of the most important days that we have lived so far. Of course, we are almost a year later. A lot has happened, and we will discuss that lot during the day, where we are going to look at where are we on sustainability reporting, what is the state of play, how do we move about, of course, on the digital reporting and the support that that digital reporting is providing to this sustainability reporting. Never forget that EFRAG is not only sustainability reporting, we also have financial reporting. I need to bear that in mind. But when we had last year a session of 2,000 people, I've understood today that we have about 300 people in the room, and we have about 3,000 people who subscribed to this session, which is huge, which means that, again, the importance is being demonstrated of how the industry feels about sustainability. Ladies and gentlemen, within the audience, we will find people from all different sectors and stakeholders, meaning we have, of course, the let's say, our colleagues from EFRAG, but also our colleagues from GRI, ISSB. We have users, we have issuers, we have regulators. I mean, a lot of different people are in this room. Saying that, it means that this is not only a day of different sessions, but this is also a meeting point. It's the occasion to talk to one another, to see one another outside our normal business. Thank you very much. Last year, we remember, but we will get back to that, we had a chairman that we lost at that time, so we will certainly go back with a tribute to Jean-Paul later on in the program, which for me is a must. So, welcome, welcome, welcome. I would like to move one slide further, and I think that would be the slide that is showing us how Slido works. So please open this or install this on your mobile phones, and they will be used for a number of things. They will be used for the Q&A, but they will also be used for a number of polling questions. Take your time to put this on your phone because we will do a test question within 1 second. Are we there? That was 2 seconds. Okay. Yes, I would like to have the first polling question, and so people can test whether this works. Do we have a polling question? Not a polling? Okay, the question was about, here we are. What is your stakeholder group? And as I said, we have people from academia, assurance service providers, industry groups, national European standard setters, users. There's a very large number of different stakeholders here. And so please try to answer. I see we have already 230 answers, 237, 245. So it works. Thank you. So the last year was an important one. As you know, we have had the 22nd of November. We are moving into implementation mode now, and that is what a large part of today will be about. I will introduce a number of keynote speakers, and I will do one by one, and then that person will, of course, come forward. The first person, and that is on the sustainability reporting state of play, I would like to welcome Pascal Durand. Pascal Durand is, of course, Rapporteur of the CSRD and is a member of the European Parliament. He was not only Rapporteur on the revision of the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, which we all know is an ambitious piece of legislation bringing clarity on companies' disclosures obligations concerning the social and environment impact of their operations. But Pascal was is also one of our biggest supporters, and is really a person we have addressed a lot of questions to and received a lot of support from him. Pascal Durand, may I ask you to the floor, please? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hans. Don't worry, Emmanuel. It's my last speech here. So, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, last year I began my speech by apologizing for having to tackle the technical subject of sustainability reporting in front of an audience of experts. However, 1 year later, after the adoption of the text and the delegated act of the EFRAG, I realized that I have been guilty of naivety or excessive optimism. Bringing a political vision is not totally out of place. Legislators often have the weakness of believing that a text that has been adopted and promulgated is a text that will be applied. In this case, it was clear that the three institutions, that the European vision of sustainability reporting and its three pillars, environmental, social, and governance, was part of a broader, holistic vision activity, and that the CSRD was justified in our European Green Deal. Naivete, I said. According to some practitioners, this text should be just another technical instrument at the service of an essentially, not to say exclusively, financial vision of the world of business and economic activity. Since globalization is evolving and climate change is a reality that is becoming increasingly difficult to ignore, let's define the criteria that will be best enabled us to anticipate, provision for, and cushion the impacts that this transformation will have on our business. In short, business as usual in a changing world. For the proponents of this view, any political vision of economic activity is at best superfluous and at worst counterproductive and obstructive. So the climate transition plan is part of the financial accompaniment to external constraints, while other issues, and I'm not accusing anyone of indifference, are not within the sphere of business and should not be included in sustainability reporting. Based on this vision, there is no need to inform investors, shareholders, and of course, the public, beyond what is considered as risks and opportunities. Political, I said at the beginning. These words sometimes take a noble and respectable meaning, that of shouting of the name of the general interest and carrying a societal vision from which companies, no more than others, cannot be totally exempt. In this case, the general interest, as defined by the European Commission, consists in considering that the European Union has a specific vision of sustainability, a free and prosperous economy, combined with the guarantee of a preserved and protected environment and respected social and human rights. it is this search for balance and temperance that has led the European Union to take an interest not only in the external impact that companies suffer from, but also in the impacts that they generate through their own activities. No one has the moral and legal right to forbid a community and its legislator from taking an interest in the suffering and the exploitation of a child, and to disappearance primary forest and the remarkable biodiversity they shelter, and to weaken their ability to know this information in an orderly, reliable, and objective way. I want to make it very clear that the work that we legislators have asked EFRAG to do is a work of transparency, rigor, and balance. Transparency in terms of the information that the EU considers relevant as regards climate, social, and human issues in the value chain. Rigor in terms of a methodology that is known, defined, and fair for all operators. Rigor in terms of its certification and the commitment of its auditors. And finally, balance in terms of its willingness to be interoperable with other global standards, particularly in terms of climate, which is most often at the intersection. In this respect, I would like to pay sincere tribute today to the Commission, and in particular to Mairead McGuinness for the work she has accomplished. For the Commission, the choice was to ensure that the European Union was not, as it has been in the past, and particularly in financial matters, following international standards without even being able to participate in their development. The EU is a full-fledged player in the global economy and, as such, has every right to enact its own legal standards without waiting for someone to impose them from outside or to explain what will be good or not. The EU has every right to be a rule maker and to define what it considers essential in terms of its vision for society. I would like to reiterate my deepest respect to Ms. McGuinness and the DG FISMA teams for having stayed the course despite the storms and the headwinds, and for having remained true to their objectives. Of course, we have had to adapt to new selling conditions, but the delegated act is broadly in line with the initial mandate and has preserved not only double materiality, but also the all pillars of the CSRD. It has also been able, in an open and pragmatic manner, to take account of certain objective criticism and to refine certain standards by simplifying them. Finally, I'm not turning to EFRAG, and especially to Patrick de Cambourg in French. I would like to pay a particularly warm tribute to the tremendous work accomplished in strict compliance with the roadmap we had drawn up for it, but above all for having succeeded in doing so within the agreed deadlines with human resources. Brilliant, of course, but limited. And for having remained true to the ambitions of standardization. I would also like to thank EFRAG for having been able to integrate its work into a global organization. Thank you, and for having always sought to include your standards next to those that already existed, when they were relevant, of course, and to make them interoperable in order to facilitate reporting and the work of boards and auditors. European sovereignty, dear friends, will remain an illusion without the Union's ability to defend at global level its political and economic project, its values, its rights and duties, and the civilization it inherits. The 21st century has only just begun, but our Union is still a teenager in the eyes of history. But thanks to your work, it is fast approaching adulthood, and like all growth crises, this is not without some friction, even within family. But I'm convinced that all of us here, whatever our function or the place from which we express ourselves, we share the same ambition and the same goal: to make our Union, our economy, our world, our humanity more sustainable, more fairer and better for all the human beings around us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pascal, for these kind words. The next speaker that I would like to introduce is an honor because we know each other for quite some years, and this, let's say, happening today is in Belgium. Most of us will know Jean-Paul Servais as the regulator for many, many, many years, and even years ago, maybe more than a couple of decades ago, I remember that I already worked for Jean-Paul at a certain moment in time, specifically looking at reporting for SMEs, which today is again one of the biggest importance. But ladies and gentlemen, do not forget, Jean-Paul Servais is the chairman of the board of the International Organization of Securities Commissions, IOSCO, and not only since 2022 he's active there, he's been active there already for 7 years by now. So it's a pleasure to announce Jean-Paul Servais.
I was told from day one in my life. So good morning, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues and friends. Allow me first to tell you that it's a real pleasure for me, first of all, to be in Brussels, which doesn't happen frequently during the last month, because we have a lot to explain together what we have been working, what we have been able together to achieve. And indeed, as stressed by Hans, the world is changing a lot, thanks to the involvement of many, many people, especially in this room, and knowing that there is no competition between us at national, regional, and international level. So that's the reason why I am so pleased to join you at the EFRAG Conference. Congratulations to Saskia, Hans, and the team. 3,000? No, it stopped today. It was 2,000 last week, maybe 4,000 today. And so many people in the discussion. Frankly speaking, indeed, as stressed by Hans and also by Saskia, it's a long time that we have the pleasure to work together, even before the start of EFRAG, I would say. And you know, accounting aspect, financial reporting aspect, reporting to court, it's a passion for me. But I'm not sure that if we had to speak about this issue 30 years ago, we'd have such an audience. So it means that if there are many people, many wise men, I would say, in this audience, it means that what we are doing is important. What we are doing is not important for us as regulators, standard setter, European Commission, ISSB. It's important for you. Because you are maybe John and Mary in the street. And who are John and Mary in the street? You are maybe a retail investor. And you would like to understand, I would say, in which kind of company, in which kind of financial product, mutual funds, UCITS, you would like to invest, and you would like to invest in line with your own ESG expectation. And you, ladies and gentlemen, are not interested at all in working with an alphabet soup of private public labels framework. You are only interested in using one toolkit. because you know that when we speak about sustainable finance, it's a global challenge, it's a global opportunity, it's a global risk when we speak about greenwashing. And that's the reason why I think that I may say, Hans, that I've been invited to speak to you today as chair of the International Organization of Securities Commission, IOSCO. Just maybe by way of background, because I'm not sure that everybody knows what it means, IOSCO. In fact, I think it's rather fair and objective to say that IOSCO is one of the few real global membership organizations of financial regulators. Because we bring together market regulators that are in charge, ladies and gentlemen, of protecting investors and ensuring market integrity in some 130 jurisdictions. Which is very important, because let us be clear, I am the first one to say that IOSCO doesn't have to be on the picture, on the stage, every time. There are excellent initiatives at national level. There are excellent initiatives at regional level, and thanks to the co-legislator and, of course, the European Commission with their well-known right of initiative. But from time to time, and it's more and more the case, there are also initiatives that have to be taken at a global level. And that's the case when we speak about sustainable finance and related risk. And I think that it can only be addressed at a global level by international coordination led bodies such as IOSCO. At the same time, and that will be my message to be conveyed in 5 days at COP28, we can be proud, we can be satisfied but what we've been able to do together. The world changed in 1 year, ladies and gentlemen. We don't have to be shy or modest. That's thanks to the involvement of many people, especially in this room. And we have to explain that. I am doing that every day in my life, more or less. And that's the reason why also I would say COP are so important. Okay, you can have different views about what it means, a COP. But for me, the most important, there is a kind of Pavlov reflex to go every year to the COP to say, okay, that's my homework. That's what I've been able to do in order to make progress. And I think that we may say, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, that much has been achieved in the area of sustainability disclosure over a very short period. And the objective is not to think that we will change the world from a technical point of view. That's not what people are expecting from us. They expect from the financial sector that the financial sector could have an added value in order to channel, I would say, investment, savings to targets, if I may call it that, which are in line with their own expectation. And therefore, we need robust, ambitious, but also proportionate and realistic framework, because you know that the mistake would be to think that we can be perfect in 1 day. That's the classical example, is how to go from A to B. It will take time, but we need therefore to be ambitious, and that's what we've been able to do together. And the objective, and especially this year, is to help ensure disclose more efficiently and effectively sustainability-related risk. Not through picture, just by the way of disclosure, which answer, I would say, comparability with peers, and how to explain that your ambition, your journey, is still in line with what you are doing in order to reduce climate risk. And that's the objective that we share together, and is to help issue disclose more efficiently and effectively sustainability-related risk opportunities and sustainability targets, and to meet the demand of investors and of other stakeholders at the same time. In other words, capital markets have a role to play in allowing companies to raise capital for their transition, and a real prerequisite condition sine qua non, therefore, is that investors have access to the right information to invest in this company. What does it mean? Well, it clearly means bringing sufficient trust, because it's about trust, let us be clear. And if there is no trust, it means the famous expression used by my 4 kids, 20 years, most of them, greenwashing, greenwashing. What do you think about greenwashing? Say, no, we are doers. We think that we are committed to find objective, and the best way to avoid greenwashing is to work, I would say, in a stable, ambitious, and proportionate framework. And this means bringing sufficient trust and integrity to the marketplace so that investors can make informed decisions about how to allocate their capital, knowing that the likelihood of falling victim to greenwashing is reduced. And since a former commissioner, governor of a central bank, and former Minister of Finance of Finland, Erkki Liikanen, announced yesterday, what does it mean yesterday? Glasgow, only 2 years ago, less than 2 years ago. And since Erkki Liikanen announced at COP26 in 2021 the launch of the ISSB, the ISSB board under the leadership of Emmanuel Faber has delivered its first standards in June 2023. IOSCO endorsed this in July, and I had the pleasure to announce that in a press conference not far from me in the premises of the Belgian regulator in Brussels with a lot of coverage. I was impressed by, I would say, the press coverage, knowing especially that it's in Brussels, not the most important city at worldwide level. At the end of July, with many people from the European Parliament trying to go on holidays. I was impressed by the coverage because I think that many people and many media journalists were surprised by our capacity to have fast-track procedure. And indeed, speed is important because John and Mary in the street are not waiting for us. And that's the reason why speed was so important, and that's what I told in my first speech at the COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh last year. I would say it's about speed. Speed in order to be able to match the expectation, the same, I would say, story than for crypto asset. And thanks to the initiative that we have taken at international level, we now have a toolkit for that. Speed is important, but doesn't mean that we drop, I would say, decision-making procedure and due process. But can you imagine what it means in 2 years? There were two big events during the finance in Glasgow 2 years ago. First, launch of defense under the leadership of McGuinness. The second, the announcement made by Erkki, we will, I would say, not copy and paste because there are some differences, but we will launch a new ISSB. They were able to appoint an excellent chair, an excellent board with a lot of diversity, not only about, I would say, geographic of gender, but also about background. They don't look like each other. You have people coming from different areas. Then to find, yes, a Belgian compromise, and even a good Belgian compromise. They had also bad Belgian compromise, but a good Belgian compromise about multi-location with a footprint on all continent. To merge with 3 other standards. Can you imagine a legal merger between a UK-based institution and 3 American? To launch 2 prototypes. To be required, like Emmanuel, to discuss with me many times a week. They are still alive, I think so. And then to adapt if necessary. Is it normal, ladies and gentlemen? Is the speed normal? No, the speed is not normal. The speed is absolutely unbelievable. The same with another French citizen, I would say with EFRAG, I would say. And since, correct me, Patrick, European Commission in 2020 asked EFRAG to work on standards to implement the CSRD, and thanks to you, Mr. Durand, I know that you was very involved as rapporteur, thanks for that. EFRAG, led by Patrick, has delivered on time. It's important to be on time, especially at European level. It's not so easy when you have to find compromise between 27 member states, 600 of your colleagues in European Parliament, and of course, don't forget the European Commission, I would say. So when Patrick was asked to work on standards to implement the CRD, I think that it's fair to say, and also objective, that you have been able to deliver on time, and the EC adopted the delegate act on the first set of European ESSA on the 31st of July. I was very happy to see that there was an agreement 1 week after my own announcement about the endorsement of IOSCO. And I think that it was my message conveyed by different people. Please, maybe it could be useful to also say something between July, before the end of July, because there are expectations. If you are saying at IOSCO that we think that you have a toolkit which can be used by jurisdiction, because of course IOSCO doesn't have any kind of political legitimacy. As chair, I don't have any kind of political legitimacy. That's the job of the EU legislator at regional level, and that's the job of the government. But we are saying, we are calling, I would say, our 130 jurisdictions. There are less than 200 independent states, as you know. We have a majority of growth and emerging market, 90 jurisdictions, so it is important also. It's about scalability, proportionality, I would say. We are saying to our members, that's a toolkit, ready for use, in order to be implemented at national level if necessary, in order to have binding, I would say to have a voluntary approach, of to be informed by ISSB standards. And that's the reason why IOSCO has welcomed that the ISSB standards provide the necessary mechanism to address proportionality and promote interoperability that preparers need. In this regard, the very high degree of interoperability of the ESRS with the ISSB framework in order to avoid double reporting for preparers has been well received, especially for me from a personal point of view. And my comment, not as IOSCO chair, but from a personal point of view of as lecturer at the University of Brussels, with many lectures about accounting aspect, frankly speaking, much more than I would have expected from a personal point of view. If you have an interoperability starting from scratch of about 95%, it's an excellent output, and it means trusting the capacity of working together at a global level, and it has to be said again from a personal point of view. But that's for sustainable disclosure reporting. We are speaking about trust, and in my first speech after my election by all board members, I didn't have any competitor against me, my first comment in Sharm el-Sheikh was to say 2024. Some people were surprised in the audience. My objective is to be able to provide to the stakeholder a fully fledged, comprehensive toolkit of everything what you need in order to file for your 2024 accounts. I'm not sure that everybody was convinced. I presume that many comments were, okay, it's normal, it's a new chair, or a new minister, a new decision maker. He would like to be very optimistic. But when we see what happens for the moment, everything has been approved, and it will be also the case for the involvement of the auditors and other Asian providers, because they have, and I know there are many according to your statistics, there are many, I would say, auditors in the room. Excellent news, I have to say. Let me also underline that auditors and other Asian providers have a crucial role to play. Corporate reporting, including sustainability-related disclosure, is indeed more trust when it receives external and independent audit of Asians. In this respect, after my election, I challenged this issue with the two well-known SSB involved in the drafting of audit standards, ISSB, 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 and ISSB, and they took on board, I think, my message. And that's the reason why I think it's fair to say that IOSCO is encouraging the timely delivery of globally accepted Asian standards that are independently developed in the public instead. And such standards should be profession agnostic, built in existing standards, and be able to be applied across all reporting firms. And I trust that for companies' 2024 financial and non-financial statement, both set of standards, ethical and technical, disclosure and nations also, will thus be globally available, as I called 1 year ago at COP27. And building on this achievement, we need to maintain the strong momentum, while recognizing that the transition at the EU and global level will require significant change management and that companies may face challenges in first-time application. What's the next step? Framework is there. Now it's about capacity building, because it wouldn't be a good idea, maybe ivory tower, as a standard set, to think that it's so easy for you, ladies and gentlemen, in your capacity as preparer, user, investor, auditors. No, we know what it means. I have the pleasure to chair one financial supervisor in Belgium, 400 people, 75% of them are professional, university degrees. I asked to my team to compute what it means for me in Belgium, not only about disclosure, but also about the famous Articles 6, 8, and 9 in SFDR. 19 people, 19. It's really impressive. So if it's expensive for me, it must be also, I think, impressive for you. That's the reason why now my top priority with Emmanuel and with Patrick is, of course, to provide educational materials to support the corporate reporting ecosystem. What does it mean? In the EU, and I presume that Patrick will elaborate on this, via EFRAG's ESRS implementation support function, also following Commissioner McGuinness' messages, and thanks for that. Also, I would say in this framework, coalition of the willing at global level and also via the IOSCO network, including a majority of emerging market and ISSB capacity building programs for entities and regulators. Next week, so the finance day, the 4th of December, at COP28, IOSCO will stand shoulder to shoulder with the ISSB to welcome the ISSB progress and adoption guide to assist jurisdiction in their implementation consideration of its standards. And going forward, ladies and gentlemen, it will be important to strike, and that's the most important, I would say the devil will be in the detail, even if I don't like this expression. It will be important to strike the right balance between the need for new development, sectoral standards, additional reporting matters, digital taxonomy, and allowing sufficient time for the effective implementation of current framework and having the buy-in of the whole ecosystem. What does it mean? In my comment last year, I think, used to work with an expression I code that I like to say, okay, for me, the most important at IOSCO is the start that the train could start on time. And that's the case. But let us be clear, the speed and the size of the trains in all jurisdictions, in all won't be the same. We will have carve in, carve out, for sure. The speed won't be the same. The scope won't be the same, I would say. Are we only speaking about the blue chip? And we're only speaking about listed company with sufficient market cap of standard? That will be the choice outside the EU, of course, to be done, to be decided at the level where there is a political legitimacy. It means at national level. So it means that now we have the capacity to use the same language with different accent, of course. But now we have the capacity to speak a language what will be used by 130,000 companies at the end of the day, with some differences. 130,000 companies will use ISSB standards according to some computation. That's a new world. How to avoid greenwashing? It's a kind of virtual cycle. The more companies you have using the same framework, the more capacity you have to fight against greenwashing. And if you have a common language, take into account scalability proportionality, it means more capacity to extract data, more capacity to make progress about scope 3, more capacity to extract data in public-private partnership, for instance, like the CDC promoted by President Macron and Michael Bloomberg, and other initiatives. And if we have more capacity to use, I would say, data which are in line with, I would say, Korean proportionate format, it means more capacity to switch to transition plan. So it's a step-by-step approach. And of course, climate is the first issue for the moment. It's a step-by-step approach, a baby step, we would say, in Australia, but it works. And I think the start is excellent because at all levels we had, I would say, the capacity to be on time. Maybe one comment with my Belgium hat, because we had the pleasure, I hope that is not your last speech, Mr. Durand, that I will have a pleasure to see. No, you refuse to discuss with the Belgian presidency of the EU. I know how the victims, Mr. Klees was there for the former Belgian presidency, I would say. But putting on my Belgian for a second, I can also mention, because my team will be involved, 30%, I would say from a technical point of view in 1 month or 2 months for the well-known trilogue. It's very short this time. I would say I can mention that the Belgian EU presidency will in the next year have been charged of progressing a recent Commission proposal for a 2-year delay of the date of adoption of the sector-specific ESRS currently required in 2024. It's about proportionality. If we are going too fast, let us be clear, we will have pushback about the capacity of the sector to absorb all this new material. Postponing the adoption date by 2 years is relevant for companies in the scope of CSRD. The first, I would say, approach was 50,000. In Belgium, it means, I would say, that the current amount of number of companies involved in I would say, reporting about CSRD will be multiplied by 10. It's a giant step. So we need to manage that carefully, proportionate. If not, it would be impossible. even from people of goodwill, let us be fair, they will have probably in order to also to extract data in quantity and with sufficient quality. And postponing the adoption date by 2 years is relevant for companies in the scope of CSRD, including listed SMEs, required to carry out sustainability reporting. This will allow this company to focus on the implementation of the first set of CSRS, ensure that EFRAG has time to develop sector-specific CSRS that are efficient and streamlining to the reporting requirement. Last but not least, and it will be my first comment, I would like to let me end by paying tribute to Jean-Paul Gauzes. I had the pleasure to work with Jean-Paul and with you, as you know, Cam, during the last Belgium presidency. And I remember quite well the passion of Jean-Paul. It doesn't happen frequently that there are other Jean-Paul in the same, it's an old-fashioned first name, I would say. I remember the passion of Jean-Paul in order to be helpful for the open environment. And we thought people like Commissioner McGuinness, good morning, and also of the people like Jean-Paul Gauzes, we wouldn't have been able during the last Belgian presidency, already 13 years ago, to have an agreement, a Belgian compromise about the start of ESA, that was during the last presidency at Belgium level. There wouldn't be any possibility to have a compromise about the start of the new regime of supervision by ESMA of rating agency. And of course, there wouldn't be an agreement about the start of the SRB. So therefore, I would like to pay tribute to Jean-Paul Gauzes, that I have known for many years as a true European committed to the general good. Thanks for attention.
Ladies and gentlemen, with our tight schedule, I will announce immediately the next speaker, who is a very known person to all of us, is Emmanuel Faber, and he's following because Jean-Paul has already introduced the ISSB. So Emmanuel is, of course, the chair of the International Sustainability Standards Board. But what I also find very, very important and very interesting is that Emmanuel is also a user of financial information, is coming from industry and has a marvelous international career, which for me is also a very important point because my background is as well as a user from the international points of view of how corporate information and reporting should evolve. Emmanuel.
Thank you, Hans. Dear Commissioner, dear colleagues, Jean-Paul said it all, so maybe I would add 3 more words. My first word is really a word of congratulations. Congratulations to all of you here in Europe, the Commission, the Parliament, Pascal, Durand in particular, for the vision, the leadership, the courage that it took to deliver on the CSRD. I remember very well having been a CEO who actually pushed a lot for 10 years for something like dreaming about the Green Deal, that it happened. It was a big surprise for many of us, but a huge hope that Europe would pave the way for a different view of economics and ultimately, as Pascal said, the way people live and around the planet, and starting here in Europe. And what I think, and my tribute to the work that's been done here by EFRAG, the Parliament, Pascal, by the co-legislators, the Commission, is because that project was led through the COVID crisis, through the Ukraine war, through the return of inflation, and through so many other challenges. And I remember 3 years ago saying that the window between the COVID and between the climate framework was going to be shortening. And it was incredible that indeed the CSRD was finalized right on time. When you see the political consensus evolving all over the world, frankly, but here in Europe as well, again, a word of congratulations for this courage and vision that it took to continue and deliver what has been delivered. The second word would be thank you and gratitude because, as I took my job a little bit less than 2 years ago at ISSB. Here in Europe, the work of EFRAG had started already for some time. Some of our work was common. We had common references to TCFD, for instance, and a number of others. But who would expect at that point in time that Scope 3 might finally be in the ISSB final ruling on our standards? Who would have expected that we would be able to connect our work in a manner that would build from the European experience for the global baseline, and, as Jean-Paul said, make sure as well that the comparability of data would be enhanced and possible for global users and for Mary and John in the street, as he said. So it's a big thank you for the hard work, the long conversations, the technical conversations, the less technical conversations that took place over many weeks, many months, sometimes long evenings, because I think we jointly delivered something that is going to be a treasure for the future, which is this interoperability word that Jean-Paul again has used. On the 31st of July, the European Commission was able to announce that first, we had a very high degree of alignment on the climate standards, and I would like to thank again Patrick and the EFRAG team, Sven and the DG FISMA team for their cooperation. We have changed many things in our standards. You have also amended a number of things so that the substance is essentially the same, even though the way they're written, the way they're presented is different. But the essence for me is that the substance is the same. The second aspect that I think is really a matter of gratitude for me in my mission, providing a global baseline for the international capital markets, is the mechanism of interoperability that beyond climate we have found by aligning the notion of financial materiality. Yes, Pascal, financial materiality is not everything, but it is important. And we agree on that. Yeah. And so that we were able to align on that definition is absolutely critical, because with that, of course, the European Union is 18% of global GDP, and that's a lot. But there is 80% more to join the party. And today, it's very clear for me that global capital markets and the use of the ESRS by local capital markets, but also beyond because of the extraterritoriality, is the best way for the capital markets to provide support to the public policies here in Europe. If they are properly informed, and this is Mark Carney saying that a few years ago, you need two things to address the transition and address the tragedy of horizons. Very committed public policies, and I think we can say here in Europe they are much more committed than in any other places or a lot of other places around the world, and well-informed capital markets that can translate that in their own way to transition and allocate capital towards those public policies, incentives that are being created. So this mechanism of interoperability through the common definition of materiality, I think, was critical. And the last point I'd make about my thank you words is we cross-refer to or mention each other. I just want to say that we started as a board for the first time Quorate after 6 months of hard recruitment in July of 22. So we had a board in July, a board in September that started the redeliberation on our exposure draft, and a board in October. And then EFRAG was going to finalize their technical advice for the Commission. And we were deeply into the conversation with them about the interoperability and how we would reduce the burden for reporters. So we called an extraordinary meeting on the 3rd of November just before the first date, that was the 7th of November at that point in time, for the deadline for the technical advice. And we made a very, very special decision for that board that was only 3 months old and that didn't even have its first product outside. We decided to put, as we say in French, a corps étranger, a foreign body of other standards in the very fabric of our first general requirement standard S1. We said that in the absence of a proper ISSB metric or disclosure for an information that a company would have deemed to be material, that company may use the ESRS to illustrate and inform its stakeholders, its shareholders, about that particular important information. So there is embedded in the ISSB the work that has been developed here and that will continue to be developed. And that is a contribution of Europe to the global baseline, and I want to say a recognition for very, very early stages of the setup of the board of ISSB, of how important the cooperation, the co-building is for us if we want to achieve this global baseline. So again, a huge thank you for all of that. My last and third word is hope. Hope because that's not the end, it's the start. The start will be, as we said here, in Europe, the CSRD needs to be implemented now. My wish, my hope is that we, as a user, I can say, we are ensuring that we in Europe fully leverage the ability of capital markets and of business to do the heavy lifting of the transition. It's very clear, there is an urgency for an ecological, just transition. I think the market can deliver a lot that governance and public money can be catalysts for, but do not have the money for. So I really hope that the CSRD will be used in a strategic manner, that its implementation will encourage the pragmatism of companies to pivot their business models, maybe, yes, to save the planet, maybe, but to save their business. Because, you know, even in France, I mean, there is a law that companies should publish their accounts. Well, half of the companies in France don't publish their accounts. But I can tell you that they all show their accounts to their banker at the end of the year. And this is my point. Do not underestimate the power of well-informed capital markets to foster and favor the public policies here in Europe. So that's my hope. My second hope is let's continue the cooperation because there's still a lot to do. I was glad that the CSRD was installing this vision that the ESRS and EU would contribute to the global baseline. They have, as I just said, you did. I hope that will continue. By the way, you also refer to some of our material in a transitional way, like the industry-based standards that we have, until they're fully developed in Europe. But there's much more to do, and so I'll be very happy in a year from now to report back to you all about our progress. Thank you.
I'm watching the clock and we need to speed up. It is always a pleasure to welcome a daily colleague and friend, Patrick de Cambourg. Patrick is, of course, as we all know, the chair of the Sustainability Reporting Board. And it is thanks to Patrick and its team, including Chiara Del Prete and Kerstin Lopata, that they managed to make the first ESRSs in such a short period. So I think no further introduction is necessary. We all know Patrick. Patrick, the floor is yours, wholeheartedly.
Good morning to all, dear Commissioner. I'm sorry to have to start when I should have finished, in theory, and we're a bit late. So it's a pleasure to be here, and it's a pleasure for the team to celebrate this high-level event. From an EFRAG perspective, I would like to put the emphasis on 3 points: the milestone moment, the global momentum, and the importance of implementation, in spite of the fact that Jean-Paul said it all already. I would like first to highlight the importance of the moment we are in. It is indeed a milestone moment for corporate reporting in the European Union and potentially globally. The European Sustainability Reporting Framework is now a reality. The European Sustainability Regime is now indeed embedded into the European legal framework. And if I may say so, good to go. This is not a minor achievement. A few words maybe on the journey so far. In January 2020, it was mentioned, Executive Vice President Dombrovskis clearly set the direction of travel, and the journey started soon after, in spite of the pandemic, as it has been mentioned. The quality of sustainability reporting was far from being good enough. What was then called non-financial reporting needed a major overhaul. What became then sustainability reporting was to be placed on an equal footing with the well-established financial reporting, a much-needed second pillar of standardized corporate reporting based upon similar characteristics of quality. EFRAG received the mandate from the Commission to conduct preparatory work and then to elaborate standards as technical advice. It was and still is an amazing mobilization of energies. I just mentioned this to pay tribute to the many contributors. Thank you so much. Let me also mention Jean-Paul Gauzes. We will have the opportunity to address Jean-Paul's contribution in more details soon. Now, a few words on the outcome of those very intense 4 years, which looked like a short moment, in fact. In terms of processes for producing the information, inspired by the lessons learned from the organization over several decades of quality financial reporting, sustainability reporting in the EU now benefits from the 5 key components that should ensure a similar level of quality. 1, the EU legal framework with robust standards. 2, the preparation of a self-standing sustainability statement directly at the source of information, that is to say, by the undertakings themselves under the leadership of their management and the oversight of their governance. 3, the assurance provided by independent auditors and experts. 4, the supervision by financial markets and other supervisory authorities. And last but not least, of course, in the end, the potential scrutiny of all interested stakeholders. In terms of substance, sustainability information will cover in the EU the sustainability matters in a holistic manner, as mentioned by Pascal, defined by the CSRD, under the umbrella of the principles developed in ESRS 1. Cross-cutting disclosures of ESRS 2 addressing governance, strategy, business model, impacts, risks, and opportunities, the 5 topics related to environment, including climate, the 4 populations related to social matters, and finally, business conduct. Yes, the perimeter covered is relatively comprehensive. Yes, it may seem ambitious, both in terms of coverage, depth of content, and also maybe pace. But the fine-tuning has been carefully balanced step by step after step, and the purpose is clear. Managing sustainability per se at business level is combining many factors in real life. Therefore, it was felt better not to prioritize for information purposes one matter over the others and to send partial messages to the users. So yes, it is a milestone moment for corporate reporting in the EU. However, it is not in the European Union's culture and international mindset to move in isolation. Many sustainability challenges are global. I would like to highlight now EFRAG's commitment to the rapid progress of sustainability reporting globally. From the beginning, our goal has been to build on and contribute to the progress of sustainability reporting globally, and EFRAG acts accordingly. We wanted also to avoid at all cost burdening preparers and users with multiple uncoordinated reports to consider beyond the mandatory ESRS report. This means in reality a single sustainability data production platform, and we have worked and are working with that clear perspective in mind. As you all know, we established early on a cooperation with GRI to capitalize upon the wealth of knowledge and experience they have accumulated over 2 decades on impact reporting. It was obvious that we had a lot to achieve jointly regarding impacts, and this is what has been achieved. We jointly stated at the beginning of September that the level of commonality on impact disclosures between the 2 sets of standards is high. We are finalizing, as we speak, the interoperability index, which substantiates this. Chiara will explain later today. Therefore, companies reporting under ESRS will be deemed reporting with reference to GRI. EFRAG bodies will also be considering for approval in the coming days an EFRAG GRI MOU for enhanced cooperation moving forward. We also had a constant dialogue on and sometimes very dense, as Emmanuel alluded to, on sustainability reporting with the IFRS Foundation and then with the ISSB as soon as formed. Our two-way dialogue under our respective remits allows us today to say with confidence that the ISSB standards disclosures are embedded into the SRS following a joint effort for interoperability. This is true on climate in relation to IFRS S2 and ESRS E1. This is also true for the other sustainability matters identified under IFRS S1 as to be reported upon, for which the SRS disclosures can usefully be considered, as you explained, Emmanuel. Chiara will tell you more about this key element of our interoperability strategy in full support to the global baseline. Let me say a word here about the potential divergence between single and double materiality. I think it is more a media issue than a real one. I believe the potential divergence is overstated since many impacts may and do translate in the short, medium, and long term into financial risks and opportunities, financial effects, and since impact investing is developing fast. The fine line between impacts with financial effects and impacts without is anyway difficult to establish. We also made every effort to onboard the sustainability reporting content developed by other organizations or initiatives to the maximum extent possible. This is the case for the TNFD and also for Senelec. They are in the room. This is also the case for CDP and the NZDPU project with respect to the digital storage of and access to ESRS compliant information. All in all, I think ESRS reporting capitalizes upon or is interoperable with the wealth of content developed by other organizations. As a consequence, we avoid fragmentation. We also strive to bring a comprehensive and conceptually consistent perspective to the global community. We do hope it bears fruit as EFRAG, in line with the EU policy objectives, support the current sustainability reporting momentum. There is momentum indeed, since all jurisdictions are currently considering, and I think that Jean-Paul illustrated this very clearly, how to best address, at what pace, and under which principles, the challenges of quality sustainability-related data to put an end to to reduce the risk of greenwashing. We do hope the momentum delivers rapidly and consistently, and we are working hard to contribute. Finally, for all stakeholders, moving to this new corporate reporting area is not a minor endeavor. EFRAG is fully conscious of the burden and the challenges they are confronted with. I would like to highlight briefly EFRAG's commitment to the success of implementation. Two panels will explain and discuss this very important point. Let me just briefly mention the key aspects of this commitment. First and foremost, we have decided to support implementation at the most practical level. We dedicate significant resources to these critical tasks. This means issuing implementation guidance, IG in short. 3 IG documents are already publicly available and should be finalized in the coming days for public feedback. They address critical subjects: list of data points, materiality assessment, and value chain. This means also addressing in a clear manner interoperability issues with GRI and the ISSB to start with. And finally, this means a Q&A platform which has been operational since the end of October, and we have received about 140 questions already. We want also to make sure that in addition to listed SMEs, all SMEs have the opportunity to join the sustainability reporting family on the basis of a voluntary standard designed for them under a modular approach, allowing for appropriate business relationships. Tomorrow, the SRB will discuss this for approval of the draft to be submitted to public consultation. The digital taxonomy is also well underway. It is critical. Beyond digitization per se, we see digital taxonomy as a tool to structure reporting even in a human-readable format. And finally, we work on the future sector standards under a revised timetable and very progressive work plan. The sector-agnostic standards which have been adopted do need, in due course, and under a well-balanced approach, the sector layer to be fully functional. As you see, a very busy agenda. Rest assured, we are fully committed to success. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Patrick. So I'm here to announce the person that is going to give us the main speech of today. And of course, Mairead McGuinness, the European Commissioner for Financial Stability, Financial Services and Capital Markets Union, is a very known person to all of us. But please do not forget that she is the driving force of the European Sustainability Reporting Standards. Most people don't know that as well, and I figured that out when I read the bio, is she has always been very, very communicative, and she is an award-winning journalist. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much. No pressure on me with that intro. I'm really, really happy to be here this morning, and a very good morning to a packed house. And I think that signals very clearly that what we're discussing today is for everyone. So it is really good to see so many here this morning. I think, Patrick, you said, if I quote you as a former journalist, I'm starting when I should have finished. And maybe I'll use that line to say we all need to finish what we've started. And we know we're going to do that with the support of everyone who's spoken before me and everyone in this room, because it matters hugely, not just to businesses for business sake, but to society. So this is really top of our agenda. And again, thank you so much to EFRAG for organising this event. I think it allows us all realize that what we're involved in is groundbreaking. It is a milestone, and we can never go backwards. We have to move absolutely forwards. I think what we're doing today is highlighting both pillars of corporate reporting, financial and the sustainable. Many, many, many decades ago, I completed a diploma in accounting and finance. I was trying to find my notes to see, did the word sustainable appear anywhere? No, it did not. So it goes to show that what we once thought was exceptional and correct actually was devoid of meaning, because sustainability matters so much. Now, I absolutely want to state that we want companies to be profitable and successful, and that's a given, but sometimes it's important to say it. And financial reporting goes hand in hand with this objective. But if we're looking to the longer term, companies that want to stay successful need to be sustainable. So in other words, there's no, if you like, clash between these two important objectives. Sustainability reporting can help companies plan their transition to net zero. And I emphasize transition because maybe we didn't talk enough about transition in the outset, but today we know that transition is where the action will be and where we can achieve success. EFRAG has done excellent work on both financial and sustainability reporting, building on your long experience with financial reporting and stepping up to the new task, a very new task of sustainability reporting. And of course, we will pay proper tribute to our former colleague and friend, Jean-Paul Gauzes. But I just want to say, if I may, just a few short words of how he's not in the room and that we very much miss that. But I think he actually is in the room because everything he stood for and everything he did is represented here in this gathering. He was charming, but I think we all know, and as a former MEP, he was dedicated to public service. And you know, that's a really important reflection because so often public service is not recognized for its importance. And I'm sure he knows, and his family know, that he has left an enormous contribution to building a society and an economy that values sustainability and financial in the one breath. And he understood, as I said, the whole core of public service. And I hope I've learned from him. So I know we will pay more tribute, as we should, to his leadership. Let me look to the very beginning of financial reporting, which was the first pillar of corporate reporting. With so much attention on sustainability reporting, I don't think we should forget the importance of sound financial reporting. Efficient capital markets rely on high-quality financial data, on financial reporting. And this is so that investors know where they might want to invest. And so companies can raise financing on the basis of their financial performance. Financial transparency is also at the core of trust. And that means it's essential for financial stability. So EFRAG's role is vital to our work in the Commission on financial stability, first and foremost, but also on the Capital Markets Union. We rely on your technical advice on international financial reporting standards, and your international reputation is extremely high, which means that the EU perspective is well reflected in setting global standards for financial reporting, and it contributes to the quality of those global standards. I want to thank EFRAG members, and especially the chairs, Wolf Klintz and Stefan, pronunciation will come, Harushima, Mana, apologies, but the intention is good. Although the way to hell is paved with good intentions, I'm told, so be mindful of what you say. But we're all friends in this room. This year was relatively quiet for endorsement advice, but it is no less important. And I want to mention one topic of particular importance, the amendments around the OECD Pillar 2 international tax reform. The IASB issued their amendments, or these amendments rather, in May. EFRAG submitted its endorsement advice to us on June the 2nd. And this allowed the EU to introduce this amendment into EU law earlier this month, in fact on November the 8th. Next year could be much busier. The IASB plans to publish 2 new accounting standards, alongside amendments to existing accounting standards, and I'm sure that the Commission can count on you to continue the good work. I want to move to the second pillar, sustainability reporting, and start by talking about the European Sustainability Reporting Standards. And I will say that this has been a whirlwind moment in time because we have done so much in such a short period of time. We're the first place in the world to have a comprehensive mandatory set of sustainability reporting standards. And here again, thank you to EFRAG for their work on these standards. We simply could not have done this without you. And I think together we've achieved a delicate balance, making sure that the requirements on companies are reasonable while keeping the environmental ambition high. Now our focus is on helping companies apply these new standards and making sure that they become a success. We'll need to work together to make that happen. Those preparing the information, auditors, supervisors, investors, civil society, and many more. We all want these standards and the directive as a whole to be implemented effectively, in full, and on time. But we need to keep in mind that it will take time for all the necessary information to become available. So the directive is phased in at different points for different types of companies. Smaller companies will get more time. The standards have also made a limited number of reporting requirements voluntary instead of mandatory. The standards also include additional phase-in provisions to help, in particular, companies with fewer than 750 employees. And companies get more flexibility to decide exactly what information is relevant in their particular circumstances. And this will avoid incurring costs associated with reporting information that may not be relevant. In the jargon, this is referred to as making more of the reporting requirements subject to materiality. The Commission is also committed to making these standards a success in practice. We don't want smaller companies to be unfairly burdened. We recently adopted a delegated act that increases the thresholds for company size in the accounting directive, and this hasn't been updated since 2013. With inflation, particularly the high inflation of the past couple of years, it meant that relatively small companies were not treated proportionately compared to their size. And so this adjustment will help prevent smaller companies being subject to the requirements aimed at larger entities, based on what large companies are capable of providing. Another area we're very aware of is global sustainability reporting. And here I know EFRAG has worked very well with global standard setters, notably the ISSB and the Global Reporting Initiative. And this has really helped create global standards that are comprehensive and coherent. And so companies that have to report according to European standards won't have to report different or extra information to meet global standards. Again, my thanks to Patrick de Cambourg, Chair of EFRAG Sustainability Reporting Board, Emmanuel Faber, Chair of ISSB, and Elko van der Enden, CEO of the Global Reporting Initiative, who I hope to have a side meeting with shortly. Now let me look ahead to the next steps on sustainability reporting. Implementation, SMEs, sector-specific standards, EU-based subsidiaries, and digitalisation. We've asked EFRAG to prioritise guidance for companies on implementing sustainability reporting, and it is really great to see that the progress is being made in this area, including your online Q&A platform that stakeholders can go to with practical questions and get practical answers. Equally important is the work on SME standards. And here we've asked EFRAG to submit draft SME standards to us by November of next year. There will be two sets of standards. First, a set of proportionate standards for listed SMEs, which are required to report under the CSRD. Second, there will be separate, simpler standards for voluntary use by non-listed SMEs, who are, of course, the vast majorities of SMEs here in the European Union. Now, I want to stress the word voluntary, but if they want to report, these standards can help them to do that, so they can choose, and I think SMEs will choose wisely and see this as a really important tool for them, because they will help SMEs to respond to requests that they may get, and indeed are likely to get, from banks, large companies, customers, and others. The SME standards will also help set expectations about what is reasonable for large companies to ask from SMEs in their supply chain or value chain. Adopting both sets of SME standards is something that the next Commission will be responsible for. But wherever I am, here or elsewhere, I'm going to leave them a to-do list, and that's a warning. But these standards are likely to be adopted in 2015. Again, sector-specific standards are also on the horizon. We recently proposed to the Parliament and Council that we postpone by 2 years to June 2026 the deadline for adoption of a first set of sector-specific standards. We want to give companies more time to focus on implementing the first set of horizontal standards. And this also gives EFRAG extra time to work on sectoral standards. And I know EFRAG is very busy, and I really want to thank them for continuing to carry this heavy workload. These standards should be proportionate, and they should be based on key information required in each sector. Another set of standards required under the CSRD is for certain non-EU companies with a significant presence in the EU. These companies generate over 150 million euros of the EU market and have either a large branch or a large subsidiary here in the European Union. They will only start reporting in 2019 for the 2018 financial year. We've proposed postponing the deadline for adopting these standards by 2 years to June 2026, again allowing EFRAG to focus on more immediate priorities, including implementation guidance and SME standards. A word on digitalization. The CSRD requires companies to publish sustainability information in a digital format, tagged using a digital classification system. We have to put this classification system in place before companies are required to digitally tag their sustainability information. And again, EFRAG will soon put the draft digital classification system for the first set of sustainability standards out for consultation. This process then moves to ESMA, who will use this classification system to draw up draft technical standards. And then the Commission will adopt the technical standards by way of a delegated act. Again, this will be for the next Commission to take forward. On digital reporting, the European Single Access Point will go live by the middle of 2027. So from that year, users will be able to assess all companies' public, financial and sustainability information on one single platform. And this is really a breakthrough. Now, I need to talk about EFRAG and the huge amount of work you've been doing and that we're asking you to continue to do. And we all know that EFRAG needs adequate resources to do all that is expected of it. The Commission has increased its financial contribution to EFRAG by 75% over the past 2 years. We've also agreed to finance up to 90% of EFRAG's costs for its work on sustainability reporting. In addition, the European Parliament has proposed a pilot project for EFRAG on implementing European sustainability reporting standards, and this is about €3 million for next year. I've tried to always be very open and indeed and honest and have this honest dialogue with EFRAG on what's possible on resources. And of course, we do need to take account of the EU's tight budget, financial contributions by EFRAG members, and EFRAG using its funds efficiently. And indeed, I should also say, as I thank EFRAG, a huge thanks to my services. Many in the room, but many who are working night and day on this really important topic, and they do it with the mindset of public service. I don't think we can thank EFRAG enough for what you have done on both pillars, both financial and sustainability. And you know, we have kicked off something that is very new on corporate reporting. And I've been saying it in speeches, and now I see it come live, that we're putting financial and sustainability reporting on an equal footing. This is really something we should be proud of, but something that was absolutely essential. On sustainability reporting, I leave my last thank you to our excellent rapporteur on the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, Pascal Durand, for your work, for your dedication, and for your continuous push and support on everything we have done. I have enjoyed excellent cooperation with you. And as a former member of the European Parliament, you know, I don't think people realize that when colleagues like Pascal Durand take on board being rapporteur of a piece of legislation, how onerous that is and how much commitment it requires. So we should salute you, as we do this morning, for taking on that work, but also sticking with it, because it isn't quite complete until everything is implemented. Now, I have a little note to myself here saying I cannot name everyone who deserves thanks. So those who are not named does not mean you are not valued and we do not appreciate your work, because you have all made an incredible contribution. And you know, your work is actually of profound importance, and it's very rare that you can say that at a gathering. And I mean this beyond the dry technical work, which is absolutely important, but it has a much bigger dimension here. In a world that is fragmented, that is fraught with conflict, that is burning, you know, this work matters hugely. It matters to those who are alive today, but it also matters to those yet to be born. I read a report in the member state I know best that young people are becoming less optimistic about the future. What a sad reality that is. I hope that what we're doing today gives the young people whom I know, and indeed in my own family, a reason to be hopeful, that the world has caught on to itself and that we know balance and circularity is the future because it has not been the past, and we have created from our past something which is not desirable. So let us, in our work here, while we save businesses, and I think that was mentioned very strongly, we're doing more than that. We're saving ourselves from our worst endeavours of the past. We're changing mindsets, both in businesses and in society. And when I took up this mantle of this Commission role around financial stability and capital markets, I also knew that the financial system and the corporate world at their very core were key to achieving societal goals. And really, when you bear that in mind, that the work we're doing is at the very backbone of improving our society and our economy, even when we're overburdened with a heavy workload, I think it should give us heart to stand tall and carry on the work we're doing beyond today's packed conference. So if I've given you hope and heart, I've achieved something. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have decided that there is and there should be room, after the very positive and supporting words of the Commissioner, there should be room for a tribute to Jean-Paul Gauzes, who has helped us so many years. And we will have 5 tributes given by myself, by Saskia, by Wolf, by Patrick, and by the Commissioner herself. So I will not introduce the people again, but I will start with my tribute. When I met Jean-Paul for the first time, there was no sustainability reporting board. We only had the financial board, the board of EFRAG, of which I was a member, and it was a hassle to find the correct, let's say, chairman. And Jean-Paul came in 2016, and when Jean-Paul came in 2016, immediately he was known for a number of things. English was not his favorite language. He preferred French or perfect German. That was a very important point that was taken. And as such, it meant that during the board meetings of the board, he would say at the end, Saskia or Hans, traduis ça en anglais pour moi, merci. And that was what he did. He wanted to get the message across. And he was always very well prepared. He was not a technical person, but he was somebody that was really driving and striving for consensus and know how to handle that. And probably he spent a lot more time outside the meetings trying to achieve that than he did during the meetings. But if he wanted to react and if he felt that the consensus was not easy to be realized, then he would switch to another language until he got what he wanted. And finally, he got what we all wanted. And we all know that certain standards were less easy than others. We all remember IFRS 16. We remember IFRS 17. Where Jean-Paul said, whenever it takes, even if the planet goes completely bananas, we will get IFRS 17 now. So that is what he achieved for. Next to that, for me personally, honestly speaking, he was a warm friend. We called each other very, very regularly. And as such, even when he passed away, not first of all after having settled and set up the European lab, remember in the beginning we at the board said, what is this European lab? What are they doing there? What's happening? And of course, it became clear that this was the inception of the sustainability reporting, where Jean-Paul, with Patrick, with a number of people out of EFRAG, started to set this up, and it worked. But he became a warm friend, so we called each other, even when he retired, because people forget that even when Jean-Paul was gone as a chair, we had these regular calls. And the most important thing that Jean-Paul told me is, I'm bored, I want to do something. I would like to have an active role again. We know that unluckily this has not happened, and I'm deeply sorry for that. And therefore, I would like now to give the word to my colleagues, and the next in line is going to be Saskia. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Hans, and for me also the possibility to have some memories about Jean-Paul. Going back, the first time I met Jean-Paul was actually at the hearing at the Parliament, where I was sent by EFRAG to see how he would be doing there. And he received the support of his former colleagues, not surprisingly, of course. So in his new role then, he came often to the EFRAG offices, actually, and he spoke with all of us. He interacted with all, not only with me, but with my colleagues, language permitting, like Hans was saying just a minute ago. We met with his wife, Anne, and they both liked very much Brussels and the Luxembourg quartier. Then, unfortunately, in the beginning, or perhaps fortunately at the stage, he got his kidney transplantation, and then we had COVID, and actually we never met in person again, so that is very sad. Hans already mentioned the European lab, so that was really the first step into the sustainability reporting, and really it was all under the leadership of Jean-Paul. So we created the lab, as requested by the Commission in the action plan. We set up a steering committee led by Jean-Paul. We had 2 task forces, and they delivered 2 reports on good practices, one on climate reporting and the other one on the business model, risk and opportunities reporting. And that one recently won the UN ISA Honors Prize. So Jean-Paul would have been very proud if he had known that. So then going back to the next steps, I think many of you already mentioned that in several of the speeches. In the beginning of 2020, we had the start of all this thinking about the European non-financial reporting standards with the announcement of Vice President Dombrovskis at the time at the IFRS EFRAG event. And unfortunately, Jean-Paul couldn't be there, and he gave me the opportunity to read out his speech in front of all these important people. So in 2020, I think Patrick referred to that, we got a mandate to examine the possibility for the European standards, and Jean-Paul got personally the ad personam, as we said that, mandate to develop recommendations on how the structure of EFRAG could look like, governance and finance. So he gave his report in March 2021, and then Commissioner McGuinness actually asked him to start immediately with the implementation of his recommendations and change our governance structure. And he was very proud that in 1 year time he managed to do that. And before he left, and so his second term ended at the end of June 2022, all the governance bodies were in place and were operational. So we had the Mairead reform, but now the current shape, we will only be remembered as the Gauzes reform. I think that's a given, and that will be like that. Jean-Paul would be very proud to see the EFRAG of today with all our staff. We are about over 50 now. We started 20 when he started. And he would be super proud to have seen that the first set of European sustainability standards is in law and is a reality. I've personally much appreciated to work with Jean-Paul during his 6 years at EFRAG. I learned from his political insight and his experience. I was proud to be a sort of ghostwriter to help him with the English, all these lots of speaking points. When I cleared my, my office recently, I had piles of them. But mind you, he would not read it out just. He would skip sentences and then he would enter sentences in French and then say, you translate that. So we at the Secretariat, we all keep very warm memories of our time with, under the leadership of Jean-Paul. Thank you very much.
When I think of Jean-Paul, I'm very grateful to have met him in 2004 when we both had been newly elected members to the European Parliament. He had a political exposure and experience as conseiller régional, but also a business career as chief legal advisor in the banking sector with Dexia. I had a business career in management consulting and with international business companies. And so it was only natural that we both joined the Economic and Monetary Affairs Committee. He was a member of the European People's Party, the largest political group in the parliament. I was at the time member of the Liberal group, Alliance of Liberals and Democrats in Europe. We both did not have absolute majority in the European Parliament, so it was obvious that we had to find partners if we wanted to have influence and combine our voting power. He had been the coordinator of the EPP in the Econ Committee. I had previously been the coordinator of the Liberal group in the EPP, so we knew each other quite well. We knew our basic political beliefs. We knew how we worked, how we thought. We knew our willingness to compromise, and therefore we were in a position to work quite effectively together. When Jean-Paul stood up and took the floor in a discussion, the colleagues stopped whispering and talking to each other because he had the gift to analyze a problem systematically and develop scenarios how to solve it, the problem. He would weigh pros and cons quite carefully and then came to a conclusion that was quite convincing. Not convincing for everybody, but for a large number of colleagues, so that we could go to the voting scenario with confidence. We both agreed on 3 questions that we would ask ourselves before voting on a legal proposal or another thing. We said we asked, first of all, is the problem or the legal proposal in line with our basic political beliefs? Second, is the proposal beneficial to the constituents and to the citizens that have elected us to represent them in the parliament? And thirdly, is the proposal strengthening the European Union and its institutions? And on that basis, we felt safe when we gave a yes to the proposal. Of course, the answer to these 3 questions was not always a clear yes. Sometimes it was yes to 2 and only half of yes to the 3rd question. But anyhow, it was a great help. Of course, in many cases, we did share the same or at least similar opinion, and thus managed to engineer valuable alliances in the voting process. We accepted that in politics, compromises are necessary and acceptable as long as basic principles are not betrayed. We both shared a strong love for Europe, and we discussed often how the ideal European Union would look like. We did this in German and in French. He spoke very well French, very well German, and my French was quite reasonable as well. And of course, as we've heard already, his English did need some improvement. He was shocked when the French citizens voted against the European Constitution in 2004. But he did not lose his enthusiasm and optimism for the European cause, very much in line with the saying that with regard to Europe, if you are not an optimist, you are not a realist. Jean-Paul, thank you for your contribution to the European cause, and thank you for your friendship.
When Jean-Paul passed away in September, I lost a friend. We lost a man, we also lost a man deeply rooted into the communities, for want of a better word, he loved most. In addition, of course, to his dedication to Europe, as already illustrated. Rooted into his local and regional communities, first. His slight accent in French indicated his regional origins from Toulouse. But it is Normandy, where Anne's family was from, which he chose to develop his political career from. As mayor for 30 years of a rural village, Sainte-Agathe d'Aliermont, he would be proud, and I hope the citizens of Sainte-Agathe are proud also to be mentioned, and as a conseiller régional for 16 years, he invested massively into these activities in daily contact with citizens. He was proud, I remember, and he was mentioning this with pride, to have organized buses from Normandy to the European Parliament to explain the reality of the European institutions. You know, this was his daily contact with real life, real people. Rooted also into his professional communities. As a lawyer by training and by profession, he had an acute sense of the importance of the rule of law and was recognized among his peers as a very subtle as well as pragmatic legal specialist, in particular in the fields of banking and financial services. He, of course, demonstrated his legal acumen in the EFRAG reform. Rooted into the circles of his friends. I cannot say I know them all, but the ones I know all said how strong the links he had established with them were. He was always available and at one and the same time listening carefully and providing frank advice with a distance, always pros and cons, you were mentioning this, and allowing for the reasonable compromise that was a step in the right direction, or many steps sometimes in the right direction. I know they all miss him. And last, but certainly not least, deeply rooted into his family. With his wife, Anne, with his 3 children, Nathalie, Nicolas, Pascal, and their partners in life, with his 6 grandchildren. They attend virtually, and I want to send them a warm message from the EFRAG community. We fully understand the extent of your loss and express again our deepest sympathy. These roots were dear to Jean-Paul's heart. In fact, it was him. He was often making reference to them as some sort of beacon in his life. They made him what he was, a man of dedication, passionate for the ones he loved and for what he was doing, pragmatic and ambitious at the same time, lucid and modest, available and loyal. I miss his insight. I miss also his smile with a slight irony. I miss him. We miss him. Thank you very much.
Dear Jean-Paul Gauzes, je suis désolée. Je ne parle pas français bien. My English is better than my French, but thank you for your patience with my English. I want to also, to the family who are watching and listening online, say thank you as a family because you allowed Jean-Paul to be available to us, to serve community, to serve Europe. And I think, as we all know, those of us in public office, you do need the support and love of a family to get you through, to keep you going. So to Anne, Natalie, Nicolas, Pascal, to the grandchildren and to those partners also, I think we need to say a huge thank you to you. We know that your loss is great and deep, and sometimes grief deepens with time, even though we hope that time also eases. I would like to think that what's being said here about your beloved husband, your father, would make you proud of his work, his life's commitment, as I said earlier, to public service. Jean-Paul was a true European, that's without doubt. He was a member of Parliament the very same time as I came into Parliament in 2004, but he was a man of great stature. We all knew he came with huge experience and that he wanted to put that experience to the good use of the Parliament. He was very considered and thoughtful, a very good and strong leader within the EPP group and I think in the Parliament generally. And his opinion was also, and very often, highly valued by colleagues and indeed by opponents. And such is the magic of the European Parliament that very often colleagues with deeply different political views can find a compromise where that's absolutely necessary. So I just will finish by saying it's sad in many ways for me as a former member of Parliament, but it's also, I hope, a great tribute to a former colleague in the European Parliament who did great work. He did not waste his time. And I think he and his family know that his work will live forever because he worked really hard for people and his dedication to public service was never in doubt. May he rest in peace.
There will be a short 1-minute video about Jean-Paul. Gentlemen, ladies, please show us the video. Thank you. Is the video coming up? We'll do it differently. Wait with the video now for 1 minute. I would like to ask the audience for 1 minute of silence.
Donc ça veut dire que l'Europe a réussi un certain nombre de choses
Sorry.
qui finalement aujourd'hui font que l'Europe est dans la vie quotidienne sans...
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we wait with the video, okay? May I ask for 1 minute silence for Jean-Paul, please?
Je vais être paradoxal de dire que l'Europe a réussi un certain nombre... Je vais être paradoxal de dire que l'Europe a réussi un certain nombre de choses qui finalement aujourd'hui font que l'Europe est dans la vie quotidienne sans qu'on s'en aperçoive. L'Europe, c'est la paix. Aujourd'hui, la paix existe et finalement, beaucoup se disent qu'il n'y a pas besoin de se soucier davantage de la paix. Or, la paix, ça se maintient. La monnaie est commune. On voyage dans l'Europe partout de façon simple. Et en face de ça, nos concitoyens connaissent des problèmes. Le chômage, le pouvoir d'achat, la crise, les difficultés. Et là, on se dit, mais pourquoi l'Europe ne fait-elle rien? Que fait l'Europe? Et face à ce que fait l'Europe, la réponse, c'est de dire, mais peut-être que l'Europe n'a pas les pouvoirs de faire quelque chose, parce que l'Europe, ce n'est pas un État au-dessus des autres États, c'est le résultat d'un accord passé entre des États membres qui lui ont concédé un certain nombre de compétences, mais ces compétences sont limitées et l'Europe ne peut pas intervenir dans tous les domaines.
Thank you very much. I would like to announce the coffee break, ladies and gentlemen. We will take half an hour. There is possibilities to have a drink or eat something. Also, I forgot to mention that the Wi-Fi is automatically available to you, and it's called the ballroom. There is no password. And last but not least, if you have questions, don't forget to put them on Slido. See you back in 30 minutes. Thank you.
Good afternoon to all of you. Andy Warhol remarked that, I quote, "People always say time changes things, but you actually have to change them yourself." This applies as much to corporate reporting.
1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I ask you to take your seats, please? There's a machine here, and if you push that button, it goes further.
Okay.
And if for any reason it would not work,
Yeah,
they will take over.
I see. That's
Okay?
perfect.
So
Very
well,
good.
it's here.
Thank you.
No, that should be.
Yes, true.
Ladies and gentlemen, we would like to start part 2, which is in reality part 3, but okay. Okay, we will be moving from the sustainability reporting part, state of play, and of course the main speech of the Commissioner on Corporate Reporting. We would like to move now to a part that is dedicated, as a number of speakers already mentioned this morning, about the digital reporting and digital reporting from the start. As you know, of course, digital reporting is going to be one of the most important solutions on the implementation side of the ESRS, but also the implementation side of the ISSB. The first speaker that I would like to announce is Richard Boessen. He is EFRAG Senior Manager Digital Reporting. He's a digital XBRL reporting expert and joined the EFRAG only in April 2023, but we are extremely happy to have him. He's responsible for the development of digital sustainability XBRL taxonomies, and he's the chair of the International XBRL Standards Board. And I also would like to announce something, and I was very, very happy when I saw through the tribute to Jean-Paul that the atmosphere within EFRAG is very good. At EFRAG we always work, but yesterday between 6 and 8 we didn't work. We played with the personnel a quiz amongst ourselves, and it was great to do so, because also those moments in an organization where the tension normally is very high are extremely important. And we were in the same team, so that was good. I announce gladly, Richard, the floor is yours.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to give you an update on the development of the ESRS XBRL taxonomy and to announce that we are at the finish line of delivering its exposure draft. The ESRS XBRL taxonomy is a digital representation of the ESRS, and we translated the human-readable standard into digital data point definitions based on a methodology that has been approved by the SRB, Sustainability Reporting Board, and TAG. Our main task was to reflect the structure and the wording of the adopted ESRS Delegated Act. The result is a granular XBRL taxonomy with a wide range of numerical, quantitative XBRL elements, which are also called tags. A hierarchy of granular narrative text block XBRL elements enabling the tagging of separate smaller disclosures has been implemented as well. And a number of semi-narrative XBRL elements which can enrich the unstructured narrative disclosures with an additional semantic meaning, like a precise yes or no answer or drop-down selections, has been implemented. Users confirmed to us that those are supposed to be very useful for them. Let me explain to you why this is an essential step, and indeed we are building a bridge between the preparers and the users of the sustainability statements. In the accounting world, that I'm sure many of you know quite well, financial data is collected, calculated, consolidated, and stored in very complex IT systems and databases. At least once per year, the essential data points are then put into Excel spreadsheet, Word or InDesign documents, and finally converted into PDFs or even printed on papers. On the other end, along the value chain of the data, users and data providers collect the PDF-based disclosures and put them into very complex databases again. And guess what? This is mainly a manual process. Humans are still playing the important role of manually finding, extracting, and categorizing the data points and corresponding facts from large PDF documents. Here is my message. Let's change this manual and error-prone process for a new era of sustainability reporting. In interviews we had with data providers and users of the data, we have clearly seen how they work and that there's a strong demand for granular and comparable digital sustainability disclosures. But keep in mind that the long history of financial statements is quite different from the ESRS statements. The digital tagging of the financial statements in the ESEF format is a recent conquest, but its human-readable preparation dates back many years. The legacy of the human-readable financial preparation with machine-readable tagging is sometimes challenging, and there are still some obstacles to be overcome. But with the ESRS, we have the great opportunity to start the digital journey from day one and close the gap between the human-readable and digital preparation. The ESRS XBRL taxonomy, when actually being tagged by preparers, wants to be the bridge between both worlds, the preparers and the users. The digital ESRS XBRL taxonomy will be applied to the human-readable management report, making the unstructured content digitally consumable, usable, and comparable. The tagging rule will, of course, be implemented by ESMA in the European Single Electronic Format as well, after EFRAG has handed over the XBRL taxonomy to ESMA and the European Commission. The ESAB, a single European repository of corporate reports, will play a key role for the availability of digital disclosures itself, since as of today, users and data providers have to manually scrape the reports from company web pages or national business registers. ESMA will implement it till 2027. And then, finally, the picture should look like this, right? We can omit the papers and printing of the reports. Of course, we are working on the digital interoperability with the ISSB and GRI to facilitate the use of the XBRL taxonomy and to avoid the double reporting. Please support me in making my vision come true. Let's get rid of the paper-based reporting and implement a truly digital reporting. In case we have to be a little bit more patient and we have to wait a little bit more to have my vision come true, what can we do today with the ESRS XBRL taxonomy? Is it even useful today? Clearly, yes. Before digital tagging is actually done by companies, it can be used by preparers to structure the ESRS statements. And it enables a taxonomy-centric report preparation. It provides precise data point definitions that are helping preparers and software vendors today to measure and collect the right data along to be disclosed, even along the value chain, of course. And at the same time, it can be used by users and data providers to set up their databases and to introduce corresponding fields. And not to forget, because AI can't be missed in any speech nowadays, once tagged, the digital ESG disclosures enable machine learning by giving each disclosure a meaning, which is the basis for each AI-based solution. Ladies and gentlemen, the draft ESRS XBRL taxonomy has been shared with all SRB, SRTech, and DRCF members and will hopefully be approved soon. We plan to issue it for public consultation in January 2024. Let's make the digital XBRL taxonomy the bridge and start a new chapter of digital sustainability reporting from day one. Thank you very much.
Since we have discussed EFRAG side of digital reporting and XBRL through EFRAG, we wanted also to discuss, of course, XBRL through XBRL. That is why we invited John Turner, the XBRL International CEO. The company has been leading for more than 10 years now, and we have met on very, very regular basis in the past. I'm very, very glad to give the floor to John. John is living in Oxford, but he is supporting the European idea fully. John, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Hans. Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be with you. And thank you, Richard, for all of the work that you and your colleagues have been doing in this area. So I, in a very short period of time, merely want to share with you the how, why, what, and who of digital reporting. Everybody here in this room and everybody on the internet is the who. So that's cutting to the chase. But we can't get to the who until we've worked out the how, the why, and the what. So how does digital reporting work? Here's an analogy. There is a single alphabet and grammar which is used for all digital reporting right across the world. That grammar allows people to create dictionaries of words, and the people that create those dictionaries are standard setters and regulators. So in this context, EFRAG and indeed ISSB and GRI are critical. Naturally, companies need to produce reports and documents, and they need to use the alphabet and grammar and the words in the dictionary. That's really all you need to know about XBRL. It's pretty much as simple as that. Obviously, XBRL International constructs that alphabet and grammar. It's a set of specifications which are relevant to the computer scientists to make the software interoperable. The standard setters are critical in terms of defining the dictionaries, and corporates are reporting in accordance with regulations and the standards that have been defined. XBRL International is merely a global facilitator in this. We are a global not-for-profit. We operate right around the world. There are now XBRL mandates, more than 220 of them, in 6 continents and covering more than 70 countries. And this is growing rapidly because of upcoming sustainability disclosures. We have a public interest purpose, and you can find out more at our website. So what does all of this look like if you happen to have all of that together? If you've done all of that, then you can start reporting, and you can report in a digital format. Now, this is not, I'm sorry, Patrick, an ESRS disclosure. We don't quite have that taxonomy yet. The dictionary has not yet been published. It will be very soon, and we will have lots of examples that conform to the ESRSs. This is, in fact, a voluntary disclosure by Aviva, a UK insurance company, against the UK SECR framework. It follows TCFD. Now, the important thing about these disclosures is that if you look at them in a viewer, and when you get these slides, you'll see on the bottom right-hand side, there's a way of looking at it in this fashion on the viewer. And if you click on one of the concepts that has been tagged or marked up, then you can see how it's being marked up. In this case, we're talking about Scope 1 emissions for this company. And they've produced, whatever it is, 8,526 equivalent tons of CO2, which is a 20% reduction from last year, so little wonder they were keen on doing a voluntary disclosure. Now, when you've got lots and lots of this data, you can start to do some interesting analytics. And we don't have lots and lots of sustainability data yet, but we do have 2 years of ESEF disclosures, and we have been able to pull those things together as a set of example analytics. This is what people in the profession, the analysis profession, are already using, but that information can be used in many different ways. In this particular context, I've sliced and diced it by selecting just Belgium, and indeed I've further filtered it by looking for zombie companies, those that aren't generating enough cash to cover their interest costs. So if you were a regulator in Belgium, Jean-Paul's left, but that's okay, you would be able to look by mousing over those particular companies and looking at these disclosures. So why is this important? This is important because it is 2023, not 1923. You are either digital or you are invisible. So this is already apparent, and it's already true right around the world, but we are moving into a new era, not least because of AI, that ensures that if corporate stories are not being told in a digital fashion, then they're not being told at all in a manner that can be consumed by users of all kinds. Now, this is the moment that somebody will say, quite correctly, hey, hang on, can't I do this all with artificial intelligence? Can I stop using this XBRL stuff? Well, quite to the contrary. AI requires structured data, and you therefore need to be able to tell your story to create structured data. That process is something that, in fact, AI will accelerate and improve and enhance, but it is essential that management stay in control of that process. Let's pretend, and we think this is a reasonable estimate, that we move from machine learning tools, which we have today, that might get 70% of the tagging correct, to AI that will get us to 90%. Sorry, 90% is not what we need. We need 100%. We need management to control that last 10% and get their story out that everybody can use in a structured fashion and in a consistent fashion. The alternative is to have lots of competing AIs go and do that work themselves and come up with slightly different answers, all creating a slightly different impression about corporate performance. Right, so this is why I came to Brussels. What we really need to worry about in this context is comparability. The global reality is that for the moment we have sister standards. They get along very well, but they are sister standards. Now today, in a largely voluntary framework, about 85% of companies use multiple standards today, reporting in different places, and the vast majority of corporates believe, something like 70% of them believe, that they will be reporting in multiple jurisdictions according to multiple standards. We owe it to everybody, all the issuers and all the users, to ensure that this process is as smooth as possible, and that the linkages, the connectivity that we're going to hear about next, works in such a fashion as to get us a long way down that path. It won't be perfect, but we will be in a situation if we can create digital connections between these dictionaries, in particular, for the purposes of today, the ESRS and GRI ones, ESRS and ISSB ones, and in due course, the SEC ones. That process will mean that if you've reported in one format, against one set of standards, you'll be able to get 80, 90, maybe better % of the way there in producing those materials, or indeed, if you're trying to consume materials from two different environments, then you will be able to do so. The alternative is chaos, because users will be impatient with that process and use proxy alternative measures. So our message is that there is a need to create a formal digital connection between particularly these two frameworks, but all of these frameworks, and we call that a concordance. Now, with great respect to all the people that are doing a lot of work in this area, we don't actually need that mapping to come from multiple accounting firms, multiple advisors, multiple voluntary efforts, because they will all come up with slightly different answers. We actually need the standard setters themselves to be collaborating in this context, to work together. They are already doing that. They need to go one short extra mile in order to connect these things across the different frameworks. So this is inherently a collaboration between standard setters. Who needs to work on this? Well, as I've already said, all of you. We need the standard setters to be involved. I've already described why. We need regulators to be nudging questions about quality and improving the feedback that companies get so they understand the importance of their disclosures in this context. Companies sit in the middle of all of this. It is essential that they work to ensure that they're getting their message across in a digital age, in a digital way. The audit profession and assurance providers have got an enormous amount of additional work coming their way, but this is one more thing that they need to ensure that they're focused on, ensuring that they are also looking at the comparability and particularly the quality of the tags that are selected by companies and independently review that to ensure the consumption can be done in a high quality manner. That process is one small additional step, but it's about the information that people actually use. So this is critical. Software vendors have got lots of work to do to ensure that they're providing this information in a manner that is as easy to use for people as possible, and indeed that they're focused on quality and ensuring management accountability in this context. Of course, data providers, investors, and other stakeholders. Any sort of connection between that last icon and Buffy the Vampire Slayer is purely coincidental. But all of those other stakeholders, including, need to work on the feedback loop. If you like something that is being done in a digital fashion, talk about it. If you dislike something about it, talk about it. That gets around, that creates a positive feedback loop and improves quality in a consistent fashion. So, hopefully, in that very short space of time, I have helped you understand how, why, what, and who are involved in all of this exercise. Who is everybody on this internet call and in this room. You all have a part to play in ensuring the quality, consistency, and interoperability of all of these materials. And tag, you are it. So with that, thank you very much for the opportunity to be with you today. Thank you very much for your time. I hope that's helpful.
Ladies and gentlemen, we will move now to the introduction and then a panel on sustainability reporting. But before we go into the panel, I would like to give the floor to Chiara Del Prete. Chiara is our EFRAG SR Tech Chair since beginning this year, but also Chiara is not at all unknown to EFRAG. On the contrary, she's been working for a number of years, not only as the EFRAG SR Tech Chair, but she also worked for the FR Tech, the Financial Reporting Tech, and before that she was working for Mazars and UniCredit, and I understand that she was also working for ESMA at a certain moment in time in the Corporate Reporting Standing Committee. She is one of the leading ladies of EFRAG. The floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, Hans. Good morning good afternoon, I should say, to all of you. And it's indeed a great pleasure to be here and to introduce the next panel and by sharing with you our ongoing developments to make ESRS a real success. And I have an easy job because much has been already said by the previous speakers. So we were full speed ahead in drafting and in the middle of the approval process for our first ESRS sector standards in March when we received this clear and strong message from the Commissioner, and he repeated it already today, that EFRAG had to issue implementation material to support the first-time adoption of the standards. And it was on our intentions anyway, but the Commission helped us to reprioritize our activities. So we reprioritized our efforts on capacity building for the implementation of the first set of standards, the ones issued as delegated act, over the preparatory work of the draft sector-specific standards. And we started immediately with the drafting of the first two documents, but even before that, to the design of the implementation support activities. We rearranged our internal organization to staff these new activities already from April, and also the due process procedures for this new activity were rapidly adjusted and reflected in our internal rules. Now, I'm pleased to announce, well, actually that's been already announced by Patrick, that the first implementation guidance is ready to be released. It's a matter of hours. And we will call it IG1, Implementation Guidance 1. And it is the complete list of data points in ESRS as issued in the Delegated Act, available in Excel. And it was so popular already in the first drafts as working paper 1 month ago that our website struggled to keep the pace of download, so we had a bit of issues. So apparently there was a desperate need for that, and we're glad to see that. And it is not a surprise, as this tool will support the gap analysis for those that already prepared their ESG reports, but it will also help those that are starting the preparation of their report right now. Richard, before me, emphasized the importance to start writing from scratch the reports, knowing what the structure and the digital taxonomy will look like. So this list of data points is a bit of the transmission mechanism between the Delegated Act and the future XBRL taxonomy. But other two important documents are being finalized and will be issued in the next 2 or 3 weeks. They will cover two of the most challenging areas of the implementation, the materiality assessment and the value chain. These two documents are structured in 2 parts. The first is an illustration of the content of the Delegated Act, explaining how to navigate the requirements. And the second part collects the answers to the most frequently asked questions on these 2 topics. These documents are non-authoritative. They are not issued, they're going not to be issued as a delegated act, so they are documents of EFRAG, issued to support the implementation of ESRS requirements. So they are illustrative in nature, cannot go beyond the provisions of the standards. They are open for public feedback with a minimum of 30 days, so stay tuned, because these 2 important documents, 3 actually, are about to be issued. Then moving to the next slide, from the 24th of October, as also Patrick said, we have opened the ESRS Q&A implementation platform. So we receive a regular flow of questions every day, and we are now busy analyzing and categorizing them between those that will be solved by explaining the content of the delegated act, those that will require the drafting of new implementation guidance to be drafted, and those that will require possible future amendments that will be submitted to the full due process of issuance of a delegated act. Then moving to another important area with the next slide that has already been mentioned several times this morning, a magic word, the interoperability with other standards and other frameworks. Now, following the achievement of a high level of interoperability in the standard setting phase, we are now working to issue guidance documents that will illustrate the detailed correspondence between the paragraphs in one set of standards and in the other sets of standards. And this will lead to the issuance of a series of interoperability maps as part of the implementation material, an area that entails close cooperation with other standard setters, as it was mentioned this morning. Specifically, on the 4th of September 23, EFRAG and GRI announced that ESRS reporters are considered as reporting with reference to the GRI standards. And, well, we are currently finalizing a joint GRI ESRS interoperability index that will support the ESRS preparers in these with reference compliance exercises, so explaining the relationships between the detailed data point in GRI and ESRS. Similarly, we are also working on with the TNFD to issue an interoperability map showing the correspondence between the concepts and the disclosures in ESRS in the TNFD framework. Last, but certainly not least, we are also working to issue as soon as possible, jointly with the ISSB, an interoperability map that will illustrate the high level of alignment between ESRS and in particular climate change with IFRS S1 and S2. The ultimate goal being to avoid double reporting, and knowing that ESRS reporters will to a very large extent report the same information as companies that use IFRS standards, this guidance will support preparers in the identification of the common data points, as well as understanding the remaining differences, moving from ESRS to IFRS and vice versa. This work of mapping the detailed requirements between the different standards is also an enabler, as was also emphasized by John before me, of the digital interoperability with what he called correspondence tables. And so we're already working with IFRS and GRI teams to put in place the future correspondence table. Now, this implementation activity, yes, it is absorbing a lot of the share of the available resources at the secretariat level, but also at the decision-making, at the TAG and at the board. So let me say that all of this is possible only thanks to the dedication, professionalism, enthusiasm, and the resilience of my colleagues of the Secretariat, as well as also members of the TAG and observers of the TAG and the board. Now, before I leave, allow me to remind, talking about the TAG, that we have a call for candidates open in the context of our regular process of rotation. So we're looking for the best sustainability experts. The call for candidates is open until the 8th of January. Please help us to get in touch with them. Thank you very much, and now over to you, Kerstin.
Indeed, we will ask Kerstin to the floor immediately, and she will then introduce the panel. Who is Kerstin Lopata? She is the SRB Vice Chair, and Kerstin is and has been and remains being instrumental to EFRAG. She's professor at the Financial Accounting, Auditing and Sustainability at the University of Hamburg, but as well adjunct professor at the Faculty Law of Economics and Finance in Luxembourg. She has a background working in practice with Deloitte, with the German standard setter. And when we were in the most tough period at EFRAG, and Patrick, who was already working, of course, on the standards but was not nominated yet, it was Kirsten that was the acting chair at that time. So the floor is yours, Kirsten.
Thank you so much, Hans, and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to our panel on implementation support for ESRS. And please help me to welcome our panelists we have here today. So we have Luc van Steenkiste. Luc is my colleague on the SRB, and he is also chair of the European Issuers. Can you walk through? Thank you so much. We have Mark Boessen. Mark is Global Leader Sustainability Reporting at KPMG, and he is also the President of Accountancy Europe. We have Ilko van der Elden. Ilko is the CEO of GRI. Welcome, Ilko. Thanks for being here today. And we have Sébastien Gordino. Sébastien is from the EFRAG Administrative Board, and he's also an economist at WWF. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being here this morning. And before I start to ask the panelists here, we have a polling question to our audience. And I think you should see that polling question right now. I hope so, on the screen, or at least, yeah, here we go. So our question to you is, and I will also ask, of course, my panelists the question, from your point of view, what are the biggest challenges in relation to the implementation of the ESRS? And please select one, ladies and gentlemen. You see all of the answers when you go to the polling. All right, and while the audience is filling out, hopefully, the polling so that we can see the results later on, I would like to ask my panelists almost the same question that we have here for our audience. And from your perspective, what are the most significant challenges in implementing the ESRS? And if you see them, what could be a solution from your perspective to these challenges? Okay, I would like to start with Mark.
Yeah, well, thank you, Kirsten. Can everyone hear me? First of all, thank you for inviting me to this panel. I would like to mention three things that I see as key. And one is actually not on this slide, and that is just the time pressure that we have, the lack of time, right? I think if you look at how much is coming at the direction of preparers, auditors, of everyone, actually, the system, it's a whole lot. And I think I think it was mentioned, I was very pleased to hear Jean-Paul Servais saying, right, this is a journey and we all need to actually look at this as a journey. So we can't expect that it'd be, you know, fully perfect from day one. And I think that is a theme that we need to keep. What are the solutions? I think at least when I'm advising organizations, I would say, first of all, be very transparent on where you are on your journey. So transparency is going to be key. So even if you can't actually comply with all, be very transparent about it. I think that's where it starts, so that users know where you are in your journey. And I think it also needs some moderation from everyone in order to make it land in a safe place. The second one is about topics, and that's a bit more on your question. I think very pleased to see that actually the topics that EFRAG is addressing are really the key issues. I think Chiara just said it, right? Evidenced by the number of downloads that you get. But double materiality, value chain, these are the discussions that we're having at the moment with all organizations and where they're struggling, especially on value chain also. It affects also the SMEs. It affects larger companies who are on the demanding side, and I think having guidance on that is very important. Maybe a few areas where you could think of doing more. I think definitely we see also a lot of questions on consolidation and how you actually deal with differences of where is an issue material in the group and where is it actually brought up to consolidation. So there are a number of questions around that topic. And the other one where I see companies now actually arriving at is, how do I actually communicate through the sustainability standards to the market? And so that is about presentation. I think that is also one where ultimately there may be, you know, some role for EFRAG to look at, can we actually help companies with that? The final point I want to make, and then I'll stop, is more institutional. I think it's great that we have the implementation guidance, but it's also important that we clarify what the status of the implementation guidance is. And I think, you know, in our submission to the Commission at the time as a Council Europe, we said, right, maybe it would be good to have a permanent interpretation committee within EFRAG and the Commission clarifying what the status is of the implementation guidance that you issue. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. So moderated journey with some more insights. Yes. Luc, what do you think?
I think Mark and I should have talked before because I have stolen some of my answers. No, for me, first of all, I think it was very nice to hear the words transition and proportionality so often in the speeches of the people that have been before us. Second, I think that the real problem for the companies is that they perceive the timing very differently in that respect. They perceive it as very stringent. We all have accepted in our lifetime that the building up of the financial reporting took decades before we all were somewhere close to a harmonized system, which is still not perfect and on the move. Here we are trying in a very short period of time to reach something that is answering a very complex element because it touches the soul of the companies as such, because it's about the strategy of the companies. And second, what we also see as problem is the perception of the people that have to help the companies. That is mostly the people that are closest to the companies, that are the auditors, the banks, the insurers, the investors and asset managers. They are really not prepared today, and that's not a criticism, it's a constatation, because at the present moment they do not have the skills to make a good analysis and a correct judgment upon what the companies will propose as risk and elements in their whole global operations. And second, certainly not what they will propose as solutions for those risks, because many of those solutions will be very high-tech solutions, difficult to judge, and they don't have the engineers to do that. So they will have to build up something in the future that allows this, but today this is not available, and there is that short period of time. And then the last one I had noted, but I have to check if you have not already said this one neither. There is the very complex load of the data points, not in general, but certainly in the value chain. And I want to absolutely clarify that that is for the companies a real problem. Upwards and downwards, they look for limitations in that value chain reporting, and they don't find them for the moment. So this is really a concern for them. Thank you.
Thanks, Luc. Sébastien.
Yes, just 2 points. I think we are in a paradoxical situation where the ESRS is sector agnostic, and rightly so, it is broad because it covers all sectors and all sustainability issues. And the EFRAG initially, to help reporting on this basis, proposed two things. One was to have targeted mandatory KPIs to report on the ESRS, and then to have quickly sector-specific standards and guidance for companies to clarify how they should report. And the two elements were, in our view, necessary to help companies report properly. Now, unfortunately, EU policymakers have dropped or postponed both. So now companies are left out largely, I mean, a bit in the blue, with everything relying on their own company-level materiality assessment. And of course, some companies are panicking because they are not used to do this in different cases. So I think there are two things which are useful for the next steps. One is that, as Chiara mentioned, the EFRAG has been mandated to issue guidance on the materiality assessment, on the value chain, etc., which will come very soon, so that's something useful. And we'll likely work on other topical issues. And second, we think that the sector-specific guidance remains a must and will have to come quickly as possible to help companies have more targeted reporting.
Okay, thank you so much, Sebastian. Ilko, from your perspective.
Perhaps the biggest challenge is also to try to look at the positive side and what's in it for you if you do report. We only look at gross costs and not at net revenues that are brought with this. Data is, of course, the dark horse in the room. Where to get that data, because it's not only financial or monetizable, it's also about narrative. And that's for some quite new. But what I also heard quite recently from some very large multinationals is that it is not so much when they are used to using certain standards to report on, but it's also the reporting burden they get from the rating agencies that are usually not linked to any standard at all. And that is something that I miss in the whole debate about the burden of compliance. It's not only governmental, it's also by some financial and non-regulated institutions.
Yeah, thanks, Ilko. And I also agree with the thought of seeing it not as cost, as more as an investment into the company. Yeah, thank you so much. So, and you also brought it up. So the Slido, so the people in the room, they voted, and they said the most challenging one is for preparers gathering ESRS-related data from their supply chain, and that was 67%, so related to data. Ilko, thanks for mentioning it. All right. All right, so let me move on here with my question. So, Luc, we developed standards for a broad range of stakeholders. How can we ensure now that the implementation guidance Chiara was mentioning, and that also was mentioned here before, that also covers, you know, the broad range of stakeholders here?
Well, Kirsten, this is a very difficult question, and I think there is no one single answer to that one. Because when you look at the people that are around the table, it's very clear that they all have different positions. When you look at preparers, by definition, when they are confronted with the huge demand of data, they have intention, or they have the, how must I say, the reaction to try to slim down the amount of data to the most essential ones, the most important ones for them. When you look at users, consumers, academics, people that are using the data for one or another reason, they have the inclination to ask everything they possible, because then tomorrow they can make the best studies that they should make, where today they even are not totally sure what studies they will make. But if the data are there, then they can do what they want to do. When you look at banks, and financial institutions, insurance and investors, they have even a kind of a split problematic, because on the one side they are preparers, and as preparers they are confronted with the huge demand of data, so they have the inclination to try to go a little bit lower. But they are also subject to SFDR and taxonomy regulation reporting requirements, and in that notion, because there is something at those two elements of the SFDR and taxonomy that should be reviewed, in my eyes, by the European Commission. In that context, they are needing all kinds of information, so they want to have everything and immediately. So I'm not talking about NGOs and unions who also have their vision about what they need. So there is no single answer to do. What EFRAG has done, and I already salute that, and it was under the guidance also from the European Commission, is building guidances like Chiara has explained already in her introduction speech. So we have to put more guidance on the table tomorrow. We have to build new guidances for sure. But there are also other people that can help a lot and that are in the room, but that are not maybe for the moment visible enough. And that's the people, that's the standard setters. And I think the local standard setters are very well accustomed with the lead of their local companies. And they can be the translator of those needs and help to create the best educational systems for the companies. The same is for the representatives, the federations of the enterprises, may it be industries or services. Also there is a lot of know-how and knowledge about the needs for the companies, on a local side. And then let's not go to the global one because that's too complex. But on the local side, you can already have a lot of people that are capable of building systems to accompany the companies in that whole story of building up the sustainability reporting. And last but not least, I have a request to the European Commission, that is that EFRAG gets the obligation or the target to every 3, maximum 4 years, review the usability and the usefulness of the standards that are for the moment and the data points that are required that are on the table. This way, I hope, because it can also turn another way, that it will help to simplify and that we will eliminate, because already today we know that some of the data points are useful for some people, but maybe not necessarily within 3 years from now, and are not useful for other people in the room. So I think an analysis, a system of analysis, continuous analysis, like we do, by the way, in the financial reporting, is certainly something that I would recommend.
Yeah, thanks, Luc. So, Mark, we have the standards now, we have the implementation guidance, and Luc also explained to us, what we do to keep everybody on board. So the point is we still need high-quality reporting data narratives. So from your perspective, how can European national standard setters enhance that?
Yeah, well, I think national standard setters, and Luc, you already said it, right? I think they do play an important role at the national level because they understand the local context. And also, if you look at, for example, EFRAG, we used to actually work with listed companies, very often the larger ones, but this scope is so much broader. We're talking about 50,000 companies in Europe. So actually, to reach all of these companies, I think we really need also national standard setters. Now, national standard setters are also used to actually bring a lot of the different stakeholders together, right? Very often it's in the combination of all the national stakeholders, be preparers, the auditors, the users, and have the debates amongst themselves. So I think they can go a long way in actually, bringing all these stakeholders along and educate them. We as a profession also have a similar role, I would think. Yeah, I see very good initiatives at some of the national institutes that are working together, for example, with the Big Four, but also with national standard setters in developing a curriculum that are not then only for the benefit of accountants, but also for the benefit of the people in the companies. And good examples in the Nordics, for example. And so I think that is a role that I would see for the national standard setter. The other one I find interesting, I think it's fantastic that you're doing the Q&As directly to EFRAG at the moment, and 140 is a lot, and you may actually get many more. And I was also thinking maybe national standard setters can also act as a certain filter for kind of the volume if you would struggle at some point, because I think many people would maybe be more comfortable to go to the national standards first.
Yeah, thanks. I also think so. So the knowledge transfer from national standard setters, as well as in, the language, that might also be something that can help then implementing the standards and understanding the standards.
Language is an important element.
Yes, yeah, sure. I do agree on that. Sebastian, from your perspective, so what role does civil society and other organizations need to play in this whole capacity building?
I think 4 complementary roles. The first one is we are engaging within EFRAG to help develop the reporting standards, both the sector agnostic until now, and hopefully soon, we start to work on the sector-specific ones. Second, we're engaging, and NGOs are engaging with auditors because there are concerns on their sustainability expertise in many cases and on the guidance they might need to audit the data that is reported. We're engaging also with regulators and supervisors. For example, the WWF Switzerland recently published a report together with the universities of Oxford and Zurich, which is using artificial intelligence tool to assess the data reported by financial institutions on sustainability issues, and notably on the climate transition plans, because transition plans are increasingly becoming a key issue for the transition. And fourth and last point, very likely NGOs will assess themselves the CSRD report from different companies and do their own analysis in terms of the robustness and the credibility of the data reporting by the companies and make this public.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, we all know knowledge is one part, but implementation is another one, and we know, roughly 50,000 companies will have to apply over the next years. So, what strategies and tools can be recommended to organizations, especially if the companies have no experience or little experience with sustainability reporting? From your
perspective? That's something very important. The strategy in our view is to reuse what's already available out there in terms of tools, methodologies, etc. If I give you an example for a key issue for WWF, which is biodiversity and nature, companies can use LEAP, which is guidance on the identification of nature-related issues. This is an integrated approach that was developed by TNFD, and given the interoperability issue, we think that's really relevant. Another tool is called Encore. It's a tool to explore natural capital opportunities, risks, and exposures. This is already available out there. WWF also developed nature risk tools on biodiversity, on water, that can help companies to identify their water-related financial risk, for example. Another issue going to the next step is to use available tools for setting sustainability targets, for example, the Climate Science-Based Target Initiative, or the the Science-Based Target Network for nature targets. And of course, again, with the interoperability element that Chiara mentioned, for example, with the index between ESRS and GRI, it's of course possible to use guidance already available with GRI. There are more than 10,000 companies using GRI already for years to report on these issues. So of course, with the ESRS, they should not restart from scratch. They should use this because it's already available, and many have already working on this. But let me mention again the issue of sector-specific guidance, because this is something missing. If I give a comparison with the UK TPT, for example, the Task Force on Transition Plans, they launched general guidance on how to develop transition plans for companies. So there was a kind of sector-agnostic guidance in October, and 2 weeks later, they launched 7 sector-specific guidance to help companies in the sectors to develop their transition plans in a more targeted way. And the EU has decided to go the opposite direction, postponing the sector-specific guidance to 3 years down the road, which we don't really understand because we think it will make the reporting in the meantime way more difficult for companies. So we think it's needed to find some ways to accelerate the sector guidance. For example, EFRAG is already working on oil and gas and mining sectors, which are critical one sustainability-wise. So we need to find ways at EU level to launch this, even in a voluntary way, so that companies can use this, and that will help companies to report, but that will also improve the comparability and the quality of the data for the data users.
Yeah, thanks also and thanks also for mentioning again the sector-specific. We are on the way developing them. Yes. Talking about that, Chiara mentioned that we have the list of data points. Mark, when you think about, companies are using it as a compliance tool, and that's not what we are aiming for, of course. So how can we encourage preparers to think a little bit more beyond this compliance and also to see, the positive effects? We also talk about actual and potential positive impacts, for example. How can we enhance that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, yes, it's absolutely important always to go back to why we're doing this. And I think this morning in all the early speeches, we actually went back to the objective of all of this, and that is the European Green Deal, and that is what we actually want to achieve collectively. And that is actually to bring down emissions to net zero and to do that in a just way. So I think to keep that in mind, and I think that also brings a lot of opportunities for companies. And it's interesting that, I was at a conference last week organized by the Dutch regulator with 40 audit committee chairs, and they all actually feel and want to be able to communicate through the ESRSs also what their strategy is. But we have to be realistic, right? Because if you look at an average company at the moment, maybe can manage their business on only a few KPIs that are really key. So there will be an element of compliance that is inevitable. So I think it will be a combination. But to Stefan's point as well, as these data become available and you will get peer comparison, more will actually be brought in and will actually start to have a meaning within the management of the company. But I think if the reporting is completely devoured from, separate from the strategy, then it doesn't mean anything. Now for that, I think there are also a number of things that can be done. I mean, we just, as Accounts Europe, we published a paper on the governance and governance questions. I think it is important to have the governance right, to make sure that you have a real good tone at the top that endorses this, that the board actually endorses this and actually take the leadership on that, supported by non-execs that oversee the process. And then, if you want to bring it to the same level as financial reporting, also, apply internal control systems and all of that over the data. I think that is governance is also a very important aspect of actually getting this to land.
Yeah, thanks. I think, Luc, right? You would like to?
Well, I think when I listened this morning, I think indeed Europe can be proud, or like Jean-Paul said, IOSCO, we can all be proud that in such a short period of time we have waken up all the industry and everybody in the world about the climate change. I think this is a real fantastic story. But in the implementation, that's where the problem is for the company. So we have absolutely, in my eyes, the whole reporting system on sustainability is in fact a kind of a mandatory strategic management system for the future, for the companies to be sure that they will survive. So they need it. They need to change from another system to this management system. And to do that, we have to avoid that they consider the whole setup of those standards as a burden for them, something that will be accompanied by penalties if they don't do it, or that will cost a huge amount of money and not bring anything to them. So we have to give them the impression that we are listening to their specificity. And that's a very important word. Every company is different in this respect. In my company, we had 5 or 7 competitors in the polyurethane transformation material, but we were all completely different. So there is no one single answer to one single company or to one single reporting system. So Europe has to avoid that they build systems in which they give that impression of we will not give you, there is little time already available, we want to everybody be up in the system. It's mandatory and it should be mandatory, but like I give you a number of examples. The auditors. Europe is now having, we hear voices about auditing should be within 3 years from limited assurance to reasonable assurance. I completely disagree with that. The transition from a limited assurance to a reasonable assurance should be in the hands of the companies. And they should tell us when they want to do it or can do it and tell us why they cannot do it. That is okay. But not force them to go into a system in which they are not capable of doing it. Because if we don't allow them to be specific, the same thing in the value chain complexity, they should be allowed to have their limits, to put them limits in the whole reporting on the value chain. I stop here because above I cannot find answers or it is not reasonable anymore. If we do that, then we will have companies that will go into the system and slowly but surely transform their company in what we need to have for the future. So I'm absolutely respect the identity of the companies in the rules you are making for tomorrow and the ways you are asking implementation. That's for me an extremely important element. And then they will be motivated to go that way.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Luc. Ilko, I just saw one question here in the chat. So who should be in the driver's seat of the implementation was one of the questions. What would you say?
That's practical. That will be a mix, I guess, at the company level. I would say CEO, corporate reporting, jointly with mobilizing all the business lines in the organization where the data needs to be collected. And don't exclude procurement, because with the scope 3, they will be crucial. That is where you will see, I think, real big issues.
Yeah.
Because how are you going to get scope 3 information from small, medium enterprises in Asia?
Yeah. Yeah.
And we see already that contractual, it's included between the larger manufacturers and the European clients. Put pressure upon the manufacturers to get that information from their suppliers that never heard in their lives of the word carbon emission or greenhouse gas. So that is the real challenge there.
Yeah, thanks, Ilko. But I was going to ask you about, so Mark mentioned comparison, and that is, of course, something we would like to achieve with the ESRS. So how to ensure consistent ESRS implementation throughout countries and also companies? What would you say?
Best practices and use cases.
Yeah.
As much as we can. We know, of course, at GRI, by the way, the amount is currently 14,000 users. The last data still increasing, but there are many organizations that already report their sustainability data, whether it is CSRD, stuff of CDP, GRI, or their own views on how to report this. So there is already a lot of experience. So trying to get the best practices and also make sure that within industries you have discussions with peers on how to ease it up. To have insightful discussions with the software developers in order to automate it, to make sure that the tooling is available, as we also have for financial reporting.
Mm-hmm.
So it's mobilization of not just the sustainability office or whatever in a company. It's in fact dealing with the entire supply chain of businesses, and not only supply chain from a supplier of goods point of view, but also advisors and the software and tool developers. What surprises me, which is sometimes a bit of a missing link, is the role of advisors themselves not being that well skilled or informed on what's really happening, being able to explain the difference between a framework and a standard at that basic level, and then providing advice that is not that good for the business itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So educate the educators.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, yeah, a lot of topics we covered already in this panel. So, gentlemen, if you would give the audience here in one sentence a message regarding implementation of ESRS, what would you say? Maybe starting with Luc.
If let's face it, if we look at the complexity of the whole turnaround from companies from what they are today to the sustainability ones of tomorrow, we will need a huge amount of money. Europe is for the moment badly equipped to provide that money. Banks are not the answer because they are already financing 65% and they are not there to finance risky projects. And some of the innovative projects will be risky. So we need a stock exchange that is only 35% while it is 65% in the United States. So we have to do everything possible to keep as much companies on the stock exchange, and I'm very worried about the small ones that could disappear, their SMEs, like we call them, from the stock exchange and move out, because then they will fall into the trap of the pre-markets where the investors are not interested in by definition. So we have to make a system that is such that people stay on board and other ones join the stock markets.
Yeah, thanks, Luc. Long one sentence, but thank you so much. Mark.
Am I also allowed 2 sentences? I would say, first of all, and I think I mentioned it, I think it's important that we actually all recognize that this is a journey, and I think that I keep on saying that because otherwise things will go wrong. Right? We all need to take our responsibility within that journey, but it won't be perfect, and we need to allow for some of that. A collaboration between all the stakeholders to let this land. And then the third is really be really transparent, because it is a journey. Be transparent so that the market knows where you stand. And I would already call on everyone, start with that in your 2023 report, right? It's not a requirement, but already start talking about where you are in your CSRD implementation. I think it's very important for the markets to understand that.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Ilko.
perhaps a strange advice for regulators as well as business. Don't give way to cynicism if things go not that well right from the start. Things will go wrong, we all know it, and there will immediately be legions of people saying, you see, it doesn't work, and it is all bullshit, and we have to do it differently. We will face startup problems, that's for sure. That's with everything. Take time, carry on, and make it work.
Thanks, Ilko. Sebastian.
Just 2 points briefly, just reminding the urgency of the situation. Sustainability-wise, we are facing dramatic crisis. We are currently in the EU and globally totally off track with the Paris Climate Agreement, the Global Biodiversity Framework, and any Sustainable Development Goals that we have committed globally. And if we don't accelerate and get back on track, we will have enormous costs and negative impacts for our economies, but also for our societies more generally. So I think this is not an option. This is a must to align and to reach these goals. And that means, of course, reporting burden and acceleration of a transition, etc. This is a must, and there's really, really a good reason for this. And second, much more concretely, to simplify the reporting burden at some point, I already mentioned the sector-specific standards and guidance, and also mandatory KPIs to ensure comparability of data reported by peer companies. If it's not decided in the ESRS at sector agnostic level, it will have to be at the sector-specific level.
Okay, thank you so much for these insights. I just would add one sentence to that: start early enough, and then you might face all the problems we discussed. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, before I close the session here, we have one candy left for this morning's session, and that is a little closing remark by Ilko here on the importance of the implementation.
You want me to sit here or stand there? I'll sit here.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, I promise no longer than 10 minutes. I will stick to that. I prepared an entire speech, which I will not do, because everything was already said. And that's a bit boring. And perhaps, I guess, I made some notes. I would like to share some experience over the last year when it comes to implementation, and also pressure of some groups that do not think this is all a very good idea. My first one is, do not fear. It's perhaps far less complicated than you think, and in a couple of years it will be as embedded as financial reporting is. And also that it's a great responsibility regulators have, but also we as GRI and our friends of ISSB, to make sure that there is alignment and that there is interoperability as much as we can, because then we can build a digital taxonomy, and then it will be far more easy to comply, because it all starts with the rule itself. If people do not understand why it is there, then it will be more difficult to get voluntarily compliance. If people think the rules are too complicated, you will see escapism. I come from a tax background, believe me, I know how you can circumvent the rules, and that will then happen. So it must be meaningful and it must be clear, and then it will be easy to comply with at low cost. That is very important. But then also pressure from outside world that counters some of these initiatives that are absolutely key, as was mentioned. We are facing a couple of catastrophes, of course, as a planet. Real life case, a week and a half ago, I was informed when we were in Asia that by a startup that was moving towards an IPO in South Korea. And two of his venture capital funds told the company explicitly that they wanted to invest, but not if a single dollar of the investment would be used on ESG-related topics.
All right.
And
old school.
that to me was quite remarkable, because what are we talking about? We are, and sorry for my voice, that's the cold. What are we talking about? We are talking about longer-term risk management, and it is as such perceived by businesses themselves, by investors, and by society. You have to mitigate the effects of global warming into your energy procurement strategies. You need to have a sound HR policy, including diversity, equal pay, safe workplace, inclusiveness. Otherwise, you will lose your staff, or you're not able to attract new staff or retain, and we know how expensive that can be. The topic of governance was already mentioned. I mean, good governance is a going concern issue if not in place. So why would you, as a venture capital investor, invest in a company that does not take care and mitigate these risks? That is something I totally do not get. If we look at the questions when it comes to, on a global scale, to implementation, it's all about comparability. Comparability is what is important. So the more indeed the alignment takes place between the various standards at a European level, but also at a global level, the better. Investors take notice of this and businesses do. So we were very happy, of course, with a very, very close alignment with ESRS as a global standard, with more than 80% of listed companies in Asia using our standards. They are quite comfortable now that on the impact side, they will meet the conditions as set by ESRS, which is also important for the investment climate in Europe, of course. Then it's the trade-offs. We talk a lot about the costs, and we see the costs as a one-time investment, which of course it isn't, because the benefits are also there. So some of the initiatives that monetize ESG policy, that some people say is unethical or should not be engaged with, personally I disagree. Everything that helps in driving the sustainability agenda of business and society is welcome. Whatever people's ideas behind it are, I don't care, as long as we fix it. So a moral judgment on why certain businesses take some steps in mitigating these risks, for example, because it's more profitable, let's not be moralistic, let's go for the solutions. And what we also now see more and more, and we engage with business, and that's indeed, I completely agree that it's a pity that the sector-specific standards have been postponed a bit in Europe. Business and investors more and more see the interdependencies and the correlations between the various topics that we have to deal with when it comes to the E, the S, and the G. You can close the coal mine in West Virginia, not taking into account the social impact on the local community, 80% unemployment, alcohol, drugs abuse, domestic violence, and so forth, will not help you either. We all know that climate is for a big part responsible for mass migration. So linking these things together makes more sense than just going topic by topic by topic. So that is my view, but it is also something we get back from businesses. And there you come to another important point, and that is what we call, let's call it train the trainer. Many advisors, accountants, or people in corporate reporting and so forth now suddenly have to deal with topics that are perhaps unfamiliar. How are you going to have a discussion with a marine biologist if you are an accountant? Or if you work in corporate reporting and you have to report on human capital? How are you going to assess the quality of a report of a social scientist? And so forth and so forth. I think the mobilization moving forward to get more insight in these topics at all levels of organization but also at universities, business schools, retraining staff in fully understanding what is needed is something that we should push further. And with EFRAG, we're discussing how we can build capacity and train basically all facets of society that have to deal with these topics. It's not only about the report itself. As we all know, it's garbage in, garbage out, as we always say. If the information that is going in there cannot be validated and is incorrect, then there will not be trust in the system. If there's not be trust in the system, it will be sabotage, and in the end, we get nowhere. So the training and education bit at this part is of crucial importance, which would, I say, will support the more easy to comply and at low cost. That is the part of capacity building. Then the last one, it was more or less mentioned. It's about the supply chain. And we all do this because we want to make the world a happier, healthier, more inclusive place for all of us. And the report in itself is the end of a series of transactions and events which data has been captured either in monetizable units or in a narrative to provide investors and other stakeholders in society with information on what is done to mitigate a couple of these massive risks that we see. But therefore, we need to rethink how we are going to educate and make sure that there is this just transformation of global supply and value chain. Having just returned from a week Delhi, I can tell you, if you're there with an air pollution, I believe that the World Health Organization said something like everything below 50 is okay. We were there a week and a half ago at 550. So if we do not take them on board, if we do not make sure that we see this not as a reporting exercise, but as something to remedy some very serious issues that we have to solve, I think it is all in vain. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ilko. Thanks to all my panelists over here. And ladies and gentlemen, we will have lunch now, but before you go out, we have 3 different buffets, and they are distributed in the outside area. So please don't run out only this way. What do you say? We start at 2, back in the room. Yeah, but before lunch outside, but as said, distributed. And thanks again here to my panelists.
Very good point. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Servais.
Thank you.